As the local theater?
Local theater, yeah.
So there's our last prompt here, and then one more that's not there. What is a food you eat multiple times a week?
I'll go. I have very limited diet, so I pretty much eat. I brought some along, depending on what the meal is tonight. I eat turkey meatballs that have zucchini in them instead of breadcrumbs.
Well, I have to make a point about ramen, because if I say ramen, most people's instinct is to think, oh, broke college student, 20 cents. But I work at a real ramen shop, so I actually get really good handmade noodles every day, toshis, and I do eat it.
Or your toasties, yeah, that's great.
I saw Leslie there a few weeks ago.
Chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
Stand by.
Tell Thomas, it's not necessarily a food, but charcuterie is something.
That is food. It is one of the major
Menagerie of
food
foods.
groups.
Yeah.
A couple times a week, that's a lot of work. What you do, I know.
Yeah, see, when we were traveling with some friends in France, we got into we actually made a song about bread and meat and cheese and cheese and bread and bread and meat. Because we would just, it was like a daily cycle. We had to get more bread and then get more cheese and then get more meat and then we had to get this other cheese and this other bread to go with meat and then we were out of bread, so we'll have to get more bread. So, yes. But I don't know, I wouldn't say that I eat it multiple times a week, but definitely the bread piece. I'm like, people are like, oh, I've given up carbs. I'm like, what would you eat?
What else? So the purpose here is just that, we have a new board member, and, as a board, we meet once a month, and sometimes we see each other a little more often. So the idea is to get to know each other a little bit better. And also the idea is to steer it a little into our work too, and the roles that you play as board members. And so the last question that's not out there, but it's one I want to hear from, hopefully we can all hear from each other. And we can pass on this one, but it's, why are you in this role as a board member? Why do you want to be in this role as a board member at Lane? And we've got folks who've done this now for many, many years that are sitting around this table. And it may have been, it started out for a certain reason, and it could have maybe changed through time. And then we've got a brand new member here. Yeah, well, curious to hear but Tom's to hear what everybody else is going to say. So see if we comment things. And it's not important that they want to comment things.
Well, initially, it's because I was asked. So if you don't ask, then they lie to me. But they asked, so I think that. Yeah. Luckily, I just always wanted to be of service, so but the asking was the big part.
Yes.
Well, I also was asked by a former student who was desperately wanting to get off. And originally I thought, well, I know that ESD does things with special ed, and I know about special ed. I know stuff about special ed, so maybe I would have something to offer. Maybe that would be something that I could contribute. And as I think time has gone on, that hasn't necessarily proved true. And more broadly, I think I want to do it because I feel like it makes me think I'm doing something of use for the community.
Listen.
I mean, changed over the years. Like initially, my brother actually saw there was an opening and was like, you're interested in politics, why don't you run for that? And it was actually a 4J open. But it turned out the incumbent who ran an advertising agency actually just hadn't filed yet. And I was like, well, that's a non-starter. But, you know, I was kind of looking around and I saw Lane ESD and I had worked some with the staff in the school improvement when there was kind of more of like a prevention, a different sort of prevention focus. So really respected and appreciated the staff that I met here. And I thought, well, that's a cool team I'd like to be on. And at the time I was thinking like maybe I'd consider, you know, additional offices later on. It's the ambition has completely drained from my body, but I have found that it continues to be full of staff that are really doing amazing things. And so, and then more recent times have made me realize that the good work that we're doing, even the like fundamental basic work that we're doing, needs to have political people who are willing to defend it in whatever ways we can. So, yeah. So if there's a way that my interest in politics and being an extrovert and knowing what people can help, then I want to offer that. But it's also just kind of cool to be associated with all these smart, decent, giving people. So I feel like it's like a credit to me. Like I get good reputation because of all the work that happens here. So I try to do my best to, you know, return that best I can.
I don't remember whether I heard, I guess I heard of the opening of the roads. And
Yes, that's true. I remember you ran for something else, and I was like, more again. You're not busy.
but yeah, so I looked into it a little bit and I just love the mission and the vision and the special needs part of that. And right, I just really kind of felt a desire to be on the board where I could, I mean, I've always been in education and I knew I would be retiring in a few years. And I decided, well, I have to continue to be on education rights, continue to make a difference in students' lives and be part of this wonderful organization. And when I ran for the position first time around, I wrote an op-ed in the newspaper after I found out all these things about it. Because I really want, like, there's so many people that don't even know what Lane ESD is and what they do, so I'd like to promote it.
I think the main reason for me had just to do with having been a 4J student, growing up in this community, benefiting greatly from amazing teachers, and then also feeling the impact of budget cuts, of certain students falling in the gaps, special needs services being at times adequate and at times not. And you know, the years go by, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I did some student teaching and I just really didn't feel that that was what I wanted to do at that time. And so I'm grateful that with the position opening up, that I live in North Eugene. I love this community a lot, and however I can serve in this way without having to be a teacher is pretty exciting, because I'm very invested in this community and I want to see strong educational outcomes for generations. Next.
The next thing that we're going to do is watch a video. This is required. The legislature, and it's, I don't know if it's most recent or it's one before this session, enacted a rule that requires us all to engage in training on public meeting law, and at least once during our term of being elected. And so we're just all gonna do it at the same time, and we're gonna watch this and then make sure we all understand it. And this has also got to do with, this is also coming up because there have been some changes in the law making requirements about things being recorded and posted and so forth. And so, get it, Lori?
And if I may interject, there will be a break.
Cannot hear you.
Oh, there will be a break right around 3:15. So,
Oh, okay.
yes. So you all have a moment to stretch it.
Welcome everyone to the public meeting do's and don'ts webinar. It is 5 o'clock, so we're going to get this started. This webinar, as it says there on the screen, meets the required training and has been approved by the Oregon Government and Ethics Commission. So aside from also meeting the mandatory training, which our presenters will talk more about in a moment, this webinar is also applicable for OSBA's Leadership Institute Program Bronze Level Credit. The Leadership Institute program is a recognition program where we provide specific training and webinars for our members. And so this bronze level courses are foundational for board governance. You can find more information on our website at osba.org and also clicking on the board development section. Before we begin, I do want to cover just a few logistical things. Feel free to submit questions using the Q&A button. As you will see on your screen, if you're using a laptop or your computer, on the bottom of the Zoom screen, the chat button has been disabled. So if you have any questions, please submit those using the Q&A button.
A man works hard, sweats hard. Old spies try to fight sweat, so Coach thought I was slacking. So I trained with...
And if you're using a phone or tablet, your screen may look a little bit different, but similar situation. The chat button has been disabled. You will need to locate under the More section, select that button, and then you will see that Q&A button appear. And so our presenters will be answering questions throughout the presentation, so please submit those throughout. And lastly, feel free to change the settings. You can enable the closed captioning by just selecting the little caret button and selecting your preference for settings. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Janet. I'm Haley Purcell, and I'm the Chief Legal Officer and Interim Deputy Executive Director with OSBA. I will be one of your presenters tonight, along with Spencer Lewis, who is our Director of Policy Services, and Therese Holmstrom, who's one of our Senior Assistant Legal Counsels. We have a very full agenda tonight. I will be talking about the mandatory training requirement and the law surrounding that. Some definitions that are in statute and rules now that apply to public meeting law. And then I'll talk about when public meeting laws apply and when they do not apply. And then Therese will cover public meeting requirements and prohibitions. And then Spencer will talk about executive sessions and a relatively new complaint process that we have related to public meeting law violations. So starting with the mandatory training requirement that is now in place. This is a law that requires governing bodies with total expenditures of $1 million or more to have mandatory public meeting training once during each term of office. You're required to maintain a record of that training. And if requested, you are required to truthfully certify completion of that training. So there's no requirement that you submit evidence of this training to OGEC. Just as a general course, it's only if you're asked about that you have to make sure that you have a record that you can give to OGEC if they request it. Even though this is only required of governing bodies with expenditures of $1 million or more, it is recommended for all governing bodies to do this training once per term. And this term governing body is underlined because that is a term that's defined in the law, and we will talk about that here momentarily. So this is one way that you might track this training. You could take a picture of this slide. We will also make this PowerPoint available to you after the presentation. So you could just maintain the entire PowerPoint as evidence that you took the training. But if you wanted to just keep a record, just one page record, you could take a screenshot of this. The important pieces to remember that you need to keep track of is who provided the training. So in this case, it's staff of the Oregon School Boards Association, and then the date that you took the training. And we have the live date that we're doing this live. And if you're watching a video replay of this, then you would just need to put the date that you watched the video recording of this webinar. Okay, so the purpose of Oregon's public meetings law, and I'm just going to read through the statute because anytime you're kind of thinking about, is this a public meeting? Should I follow the notice requirements that Teresa's going to talk about in a little while? You need to keep in mind kind of the general thought behind our Oregon government public meeting law. And that is the Oregon form of government requires an informed public aware of the deliberations and decisions of governing bodies and the information upon which such decisions were made. It is the intent of the public meeting law that decisions of governing bodies be arrived at openly. So generally, your meetings should be open, the deliberations and the way you reach decisions as a governing body should be done in public. And there are a variety of times when you can do things in executive session, which Spencer will talk about later. But for the most part, you need to make sure that you're making decisions and deliberating towards those decisions in an open meeting that's been properly noticed. And Teresa will walk us through all of those requirements here in a bit. Again, there are several terms underlined here. Those are terms that are defined in law, and we will talk about those now. I'm going to start going through the definitions, and this is going to be a little bit tedious, but it is helpful to know these definitions and be able to refer back to them when you have questions about whether or not something is subject to a public meeting. What is a public meeting? Meeting means the convening of a governing body of a public body for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or deliberate toward a decision on any matter. And so all of these terms that are underlined are defined, and we will talk through those. A simple kind of way of thinking about this is if there's a quorum and there's a discussion, deliberation, decision on public body business, then that is a meeting. What is a governing body? A governing body means the members of any public body which consists of make decisions for or recommendations to a public body on policy or administration. And then it's important to keep in mind that a governing body is different than a public body. Sometimes these definitions overlap, but not always. So a public body is the state, any regional council, county, city, or district, or any municipal or public corporation, or any board, department, commission, council, bureau, committee, or subcommittee, or advisory group, or any other agency thereof. And so a school district, an ESD, a community college, a charter school would be considered public bodies, as would the boards of those public bodies. Convening. So convening has four different definitions here. Some of them are obvious and we've known about them for years, and other ones have not been particularly specified in the statute until recently. So the first one, gathering in a physical location, that's kind of the easiest one. That's typically when you get together in person with your board. Historically, that's how school board meetings and other public body meetings happened, as everybody gathered together in a physical location. And then over time, we've started to use technology to meet. You know, you might have a board member that calls in over the phone. Everybody's in person, but one person's on the phone. And then over time, we've transitioned to sometimes a meeting has taken place completely over Zoom or some other electronic platform, and there's no one physically in one place. That is still convening. The other two are not as obvious in what they mean. Using serial electronic written communication among participants could also be a convening. And so an example of this could be a board secretary sends out an agenda to all the board members, and the board members start replying all and explaining why they will vote yes on certain action items. So that would be a convening, and most likely it would not have been properly noticed. Therese will talk about what those notice requirements are in a little bit. But this is where you could unintentionally convene as a board if you start having serial written communications among your board members. The last one here, using an intermediary to communicate among participants. So an example of this could be the board chair reaches out to each board member to get their thoughts on an upcoming vote. And with each successive conversation, the board chair shares how other board members feel and will be voting. So this is another situation where a board could find themselves accidentally having a public meeting through an intermediary, and that could cause some problems. Decision. Decision means any determination, action, vote, or final disposition upon a motion, proposal, resolution, order, ordinance, or measure on which a vote of a governing body is required at any meeting at which a quorum is present. And so at board meetings, you may make decisions and it may be called something different, but if you are making a decision by vote, then that is a decision. So it doesn't matter if you're calling it a resolution, an order, somebody makes a motion. If you are voting on something, that is making a decision. Deliberation is also defined, and that includes a discussion or communication that is part of a decision-making process. So it's important to keep in mind that part of deliberating could be one-way communications, where a communication is sent from one board member to the others, and that communication is used as part of the decision-making process. That is part of the deliberation. Communication, the expression or transmission of information from one person to another through verbal, nonverbal, written, or electronic means. Nonverbal means include gestures such as thumbs up and thumbs down, as well as sign language. So again, this is written right into the rule. It makes it clear that there are forms of communications that are nonverbal, and that would count in the definition of communication. Decision-making process is defined in the law. The process a governing body engages in to make a decision, such as identifying or selecting the nature of the decision to be made, gathering information related to a decision to be made, identifying and assessing alternatives, weighing information, and making a decision. So that's the decision-making process. Discussion means the consideration or debate of a matter. And discussion is not limited to the verbal communication, but includes the consideration of the matter. Intermediary means a person who is used to facilitate communications among members of a governing body about a matter subject to deliberation or decision by the governing body by sharing information received from a member or members of the governing body with other members of the governing body. The term intermediary can include a member of the governing body. And so in the case of a superintendent, or in a school board, an intermediary may be a person like a superintendent who is facilitating a communication between different board members. Quorum is defined in the law as the minimum number of members of a governing body required to legally transact business. And there is a statute that applies to school districts and defines quorum as a majority of the members of the school district school board shall constitute a quorum. The affirmative vote of the majority of members of the board is required to transact any business. And the ESDs and community colleges have a similar statute, just a different statutory reference, and those are on the slide there. For charter schools, it may vary by charter school, so you want to look at your bylaws or charter agreement. And if you can't tell by looking at those two documents, please reach out to legal counsel, and either we or your designated legal counsel can help you figure out what a quorum is for purposes of a charter school. Serial electronic written communication. So this is also defined in the law. a series of successive or sequential communications among members of a governing body using written electronic means, including emails, texts, social media, and other electronic applications that communicate the written word. And Teresa's going to talk in a little bit more detail about that particular topic when we get to that section.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you.
So when do public meeting laws apply? So public meeting laws apply to your regular meetings. So those are your meetings that when you have your organizational meeting, usually in July, when you set your meetings for the year, those are your regular meetings. Public meeting law also applies to special meetings. So during the year, you have your regular meetings already scheduled, but sometimes there's a need to schedule a special meeting to consider something that's that comes up between your regularly scheduled meetings, and you cannot wait till the regularly scheduled meeting. Emergency meetings, this one doesn't happen as often and has to include an actual emergency, something that would require the board to get together urgently. Public meeting law also applies to executive sessions, and Spencer's going to go into a lot more detail about executive sessions later. And then finally, meetings held for the purpose of either presenting information to the governing body to prepare the governing body for a regular or special meeting, or to allow the governing body to engage in preliminary discussions or deliberations. And oftentimes you are calling these work sessions or workshop meetings. Public meeting law would apply to those meetings as well. Public meeting laws apply to decision-making bodies. And a decision-making body is a body with the authority to make decisions for the public body on policy or administration. A body meets this standard if its decision-making authority includes the power to exercise governmental power and act on behalf of the public body. So definitely, for the most part, your school board is the decision-making body. It can make decisions on behalf of the public body. Public meeting laws also apply to advisory bodies. So an advisory body is a body with authority to make recommendations to a public body on policy or administration. So if you set up a committee of your board as an advisory committee and that body has the authority to make a recommendation to your full board, then public meeting law applies. And we will talk a little bit more in detail about committees and subcommittees and public meeting laws applying. But it's just important to remember that public meeting law may apply and most likely will apply to any kind of committee that your board is creating. Public meeting laws do not apply to fact gathering bodies, so bodies with only the authority to gather and provide purely factual information to a public body, and that do not have the authority to make decisions or recommendations. So for example, if your board was interested in learning more about AI, for example, and you tasked 2 of your board members with going out and gathering information about different AI technologies, and they brought that back to your board for the board to consider, as long as they weren't making some sort of recommendation or decision, that would not have to be subject to the public meeting laws. Bodies advising individual public officials. So bodies appointed by an individual public official with authority to make recommendations only to that individual public official who has the authority to act on the body's recommendation and is not required to pass the recommendations on unchanged to a public body. So in the case of schools, that might be a superintendent or a director of a charter school that creates a body that's going to make recommendations to that superintendent or director, and then that superintendent or director makes a decision on their own. If that superintendent or director has to take whatever that recommendation is up to the board for a decision, then that would be a public meeting that would need to be noticed, and this exception would not apply. So this only applies if that public official that the body is reporting to has the authority to make decisions on their own without the board's input or authority. And then finally, public meeting laws do not apply to certain multi-jurisdictional bodies. And these are bodies whose organ members do not constitute a majority of governing bodies' voting members. I'm not exactly sure what their intent here was, but what I'm imagining is, for example, if you had less than a quorum of your board members on the OSBA board, the OSBA board is a multi-jurisdictional body, that wouldn't be a problem. But if every single member of a particular board was on the OSBA board, then that might be something required to have a public meeting notice in your district. I'm not aware of that happening, but that's one example I could think of. Also not a meeting. On-site inspections of any project or program. So if your entire school board wants to go see a new CTE program that just started in the district, you can do that, and that's not a meeting that you have to notice. Your whole board can go to a national, regional, or state association meeting, and that is not a meeting that you have to notice. Social gatherings, as a board, you can meet as a full board for a social gathering. And this case here involved a school board that had a barbecue, and somebody was concerned about whether that was a public meeting, and the Court of Appeals said no, school boards can have social gatherings. Now, the caveat with all three of these things is if you go and see a program, or you attend a conference, or you have a social gathering, you can do that, but it would become a public meeting if you start trying to decide or deliberate any decision while you're at that particular event or program. So the key would be to avoid deliberating or making decisions about anything regarding the district or the charter school or community college or ESD while you're at one of those events. These are newer things to add it to the law, not a meeting. So purely factual or educational in nature, and that convey no deliberation or decision on any matter that might reasonably come before the governing body. That would not be a meeting. Not related to any matter that at any time could reasonably be foreseen to come before the governing body for deliberation or decision. So like if a quorum of your board or your whole board was emailing each other, texting each other, had a conversation at a social gathering about, who you want to be elected mayor of the city, that would not be a public meeting because the board's never going to be voting on the mayor of the city together. That's just not business that ever comes before the school board. So it's just not related and doesn't have to be noticed as a public meeting. And then finally, non-substantive in nature, such as communications relating to scheduling, leaves of absence, and other similar matters. So frequently when you're scheduling your board meetings or special meetings, you might communicate via email or text, hey, are you available Tuesday night at 5? And people start responding yes or no, or I'm not available till 5:30, and those kinds of communications, that would not be a public meeting because it's non-substantive in nature and you're just talking about scheduling. So that's something that we've known for a while, but now this is in the law. So it's really nice that we have clarity in the law around that. And I've touched on this a couple of times now, but whether or not public meeting law applies to committees, subcommittees, advisory committees, is if that committee, subcommittee, advisory committee has the authority to make a decision for a public body. So if the board has authorized that committee, subcommittee to make a decision for the public body, or if that group has the authority to make recommendations to the public body, then those are public meetings and they need to be noticed. And again, one of these committees or subcommittees could be 2 or more board members.
The structure motorized pergola system is reinventing the way homeowners experience the outdoors. The most
Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Therese.
Thank you, Haley. So we've discussed what a meeting is and when public meetings law applies. So now we're going to discuss the required elements. And I may use the term district out of habit, but as Haley mentioned earlier, all of these rules and laws apply equally to community colleges, charter schools, and ESDs as well. Where they are different, I'll point that out. All right, so first and foremost, public meetings must be open to the public, except as otherwise permitted under the law, which is under executive session, and we'll talk about that in more detail. The law prohibits a quorum of the governing body from meeting in private for the purpose of deciding on or deliberating towards a decision on any matter. And so all of these requirements that we're going to go over are what you need to establish to make sure that the meeting is not held in private. So public meetings must comply with certain location requirements. The location of public meetings generally must be within the geographic boundaries of the public body. For school boards, this is generally going to be the district boundaries. The meetings could also be held at an administrative headquarters if that was outside of the geographic boundaries, or at the nearest practical location. Or the law does allow for holding a public meeting in any Indian country in Oregon. I've not seen that come up. And the location must be accessible to persons with disabilities, which I'll talk about in a minute. I want to mention, when we're talking about location, two things. One, for some virtual charter schools, there may be sometimes a question about where that meeting should be held. And I would say generally that's a case where the public body's administrative headquarters is probably the best in terms of a physical location. And then we also get questions about the location of a board retreat and whether or not the board can have a retreat outside of the boundaries of the district, for example. If that retreat meets the criteria to be a public meeting that we just went through, then the location of the retreat should be held within the boundaries of, or should meet these criteria that I just mentioned. And it should not be somewhere far afield, because it needs to be open to the public, and that means the public of the district. All right. So there are a few exceptions, however, for the location of a public meeting. If there's a training session where there's no deliberations toward a decision, right, and then it's not going to necessarily meet the definition of a public meeting that Haley went over, and that's not one that has to meet those location requirements. A joint meeting of governing bodies or of a governing body and Oregon Indian tribal officials is another situation where it could be held in a different location. And then finally, if there's an actual emergency that necessitates immediate action, then that's a situation where you don't necessarily have to meet those specific location requirements. There's also, under Oregon law, public meetings may not be held in a location that discriminates on the basis of several protected classes, such as race, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, age, or disability. This kind of furthers the idea that anyone can attend public meetings. I've not seen this come up, but I imagine that we may see questions about this in the coming years, especially for some of our charter school boards that sometimes meet in buildings that are owned and operated by other community organizations. And in addition to holding the meeting in a location where discrimination is not practiced, the meeting must also be in a place that is accessible to persons with disabilities. And the board must also provide an interpreter for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing if they requested at least 48 hours in advance. There's no, I want to point out, kind of while we're talking about the interpreter language, there's no requirement under public meetings law to translate a public meeting into different languages. This is something that your district should just consider based on the needs of your district, and then provide any communication supports that might be appropriate. All right. It is required under Oregon Public Meetings Law to make all meetings accessible remotely through technological means to the extent reasonably possible, and provide opportunities for members of the general public to remotely submit oral and written testimony if in-person oral and written testimony is also allowed. I will talk a little bit more about virtual meetings in the next slides. Meetings may be held entirely virtually, where board members attend remotely and there's no physical location for members of the public to attend. One thing I want to point out Then if a member of the public body is allowed to attend remotely, Oregon rules do say that members of the media must be allowed to attend remotely as well. This is a new rule. For a virtual meeting, there's no requirement, if you have a virtual meeting, there's no requirement that you make a physical location available. It's sufficient to provide electronic means to at least listen to the meeting, or, you know, as I mentioned, to the extent reasonably possible, provide a full remote participation option. And so there's no requirement that you necessarily have somewhere at the district, for example, where people can attend, even if everyone else is participating virtually. All right, so we've discussed who may attend the public meeting and where it must be held. So now I want to talk about all of the requirements of providing notice about a public meeting. The rules require that a notice for meetings which are open to all members of the public contain at least the following information: the time, date, and location, the electronic link or telephone access information, a list of the principal subjects anticipated to be considered at the meeting, and generally that's accomplished by providing the agenda to the public. But that does not mean that you cannot add subjects to be considered at the meeting once you are in your public meeting. Boards do have the right to add subjects to the agenda. And then finally, notice of a public meeting must also include the name, telephone number, and email address of a person to contact if someone needs to request an interpreter or other communication aids, or if you're planning on providing a sign language interpreter or other communication aid, that that'll be provided, right? And that's to comply with that law that you must make provide some accommodations to those who are deaf or hard of hearing.
That's it.
So to provide notice to the public, the method which is sufficient and easiest to meet is to post notice of the meetings conspicuously on your website, such as an agenda. If you do not have a website, then there are other options, such as there's the Oregon Transparency website, and then there's kind of a whole list in the rule that we have on our slide here of other means that will provide notice to the public. We do encourage districts to go ahead and review your practices to ensure notice is adequate because of some of these recent changes, such as including information about who to contact for an interpreter for those who might need it that are deaf or hard of hearing. Notice is generally accomplished by district staff, but these requirements are applicable to the boards. All right, so in addition to the requirement to provide notice to the general public, there is also a requirement to provide actual notice to interested persons, those who are known to the district that are interested in receiving notice of a public meeting. And the rule says that this can be done using mailing lists, listserv, social media, or any other means reasonably calculated to provide actual notice. We would, maintaining a list is a safe and easy way to meet this requirement. But if you have any concerns or questions about it, we recommend that you reach out to us or your general counsel to make sure that you're meeting this requirement. Just like with the notice to the interested persons, you also have an obligation to provide actual notice to members of the media who have requested it, and you can satisfy that either by providing them the notice in the method that the media representative requests, if they request a specific method, or you have the discretion to provide that notice by any other means reasonably calculated to provide that. So you're not required to provide notice to media representatives in the way that they ask. All right, so there is a special requirement for notice of public meetings for ESDs. ESDs are required to provide notices of their public meetings on the Oregon Transparency website to the extent practical. And this is a requirement that is also for on state agencies. All right. So what about notice of meetings not open to the public? The notice, if there's a meeting that's not going to be open to the public, the notice has to include additional information. You must include the specific statutory citation and appropriate subsection and paragraph which authorizes you to enter into a portion of the meeting that is closed to the public, and a general description of what that statutory authorization is. For example, you could add onto your agenda citation to ORS 192-662A to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or agent, right? That's an example of something that you could add that would satisfy, that requirement to provide that extra notice. And then if the executive session is part of an open meeting, which is the most common, right? A board has an open meeting and then switches into executive session. The presiding officer must identify in the open session that same statutory provision and a general description of what it is as the reason for going into a session that is closed to the public. And Spencer's going to talk more about what executive session means and who's allowed and all that stuff. All right, so when do you have to provide notice of a public meeting? For a regular meeting, you should provide as much notice as reasonably possible, but no less than 48 hours advance notice. For a special meeting, you must provide notice at least 24 hours in advance. And then there is an option to have an emergency meeting where you meet with less than 24 hours notice to the public. And you only provide notice as is appropriate to the circumstances. There's an obligation to attempt to contact media and other interested persons if going into an emergency meeting. And then if you rely on the emergency meeting statute to go into a meeting with less than 24 hours notice, you should, in your minutes, describe what the emergency was that justified having your meeting with less than 24 hours notice and why it could not be delayed for 24 hours. All right, so we've discussed who can attend, where the public meeting must be held, what sort of notice must be provided, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about your record-keeping obligations. You are required to keep minutes of your public meetings, and they must include a true reflections of the matters discussed and the views of the participants, as well as all members of the governing body present, all motions, proposals, resolutions, orders, ordinances, and measures that are proposed and how or what their disposition was, the results of all votes, and the vote of each member by name if your board has 25 or fewer members, the substance of any discussion on any matter, and a reference to any document that's discussed at the meeting. All of these are the required elements for your minutes. And we often get the question about when do minutes need to be available. There's no specific requirement in public meetings law as to when the meetings need to be available, but the law does say they need to be available within a reasonable time after the meeting. And so, the law does recognize that it takes some time to create the minutes. These minutes are public records and need to be retained permanently under Oregon's rules about retention of public records. Because they are public records, they must be disclosed upon request. There are some exceptions for executive session minutes, however, which are generally going to be confidential. And so we're going to discuss executive session meeting minutes next. So even when you have a meeting not open to the public, there's still a requirement to create and retain minutes. And the content requirements are the same, with the exception of some, involving students, and Spencer's going to go into that more. You're not required, if someone requests your executive session meeting minutes, You're not required to disclose them if the disclosure is inconsistent with the purpose for which the meeting was authorized to be held. So there's no guarantee that you'll never have to disclose your executive session minutes, but it's generally not going to be the case. Of course, if you have someone who's requested a copy of your executive session meeting minutes, then I would request that you go ahead and speak with your general counsel of this legal so that we can kind of help you work through that request. All right, so we also get questions about keeping recordings of meetings instead of written minutes. The Oregon Public Meetings Law does allow for maintaining a recording of a meeting as minutes if the recording has all the required pieces of the minute. But the Oregon Secretary of State requires that school board meeting minutes be kept in hard copy. So there is a process to get a waiver from the Secretary of State's Archives Division if you want to keep your recordings as your minutes. I would recommend that if you're considering that process, that you work with the Archives Division. And you know, we have also gotten the question about whether or not a transcript of a recording, if it's approved by the board as minutes, would count. And it probably, if it has all the content requirements and if you're maintaining it in hard copy, then it probably meets both of those requirements. All right. Speaking of recordings, this year a new law went into effect that requires school districts, ESDs, community college districts, and public universities to post video recordings of non-executive session meetings within 7 days of the meeting. These recordings need to be posted to your website or to a social media site. If the district facilities lack broadband internet access, then an audio recording is sufficient to comply with this law. And this does not apply to smaller school districts that have fewer than 50 ADM. And also, of course, the requirement to post a recording of the the meeting does not apply to executive session.
Meet my friend Dizzy.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the role of members of the public at a public meeting, and the role public meetings do not have any requirements of a right to participate or a right to provide public testimony or public comment. It's just a right to know what's going on. However, there are a few times where boards must allow public comment, such as, you know, budget approvals, charter approvals, prior to using certain requirements for executive session. And then, of course, many boards allow for public comment because it can be a useful tool. So if you do allow for public comment, then there are a few requirements that you need to follow under Oregon's Public Meetings Law. When public testimony is permitted, then you do need to allow for oral testimony by telephone, video, or other electronic or virtual means if you're allowing for in-person oral testimony. And similarly, the same for written testimony, including electronic, if you're allowing for in-person written testimony, but you can require that it be submitted in advance. You just have to have parity between the two. And then also, when you're allowing for public comment, the presiding officer of the board has authority under Oregon Public Meeting Law to keep order and impose reasonable restrictions to make sure that the meeting is conducted efficiently and orderly. So this generally means, you know, and so this means you can regulate the order of public comment, the length of how long you will allow someone to speak in public comment, and also limit appearances to people who are only going to comment on subjects that are on the agenda, for example. But I do want to point out that boards should be careful to avoid viewpoint discrimination, which could result in a complaint of a First Amendment violation, and to work with their general counsel or contact Case Legal if there's a question about that. There has been litigation on this issue. So if you're dealing with issues surrounding public comment and when and how to restrict public comment on certain subjects, this is something that, you know, just be mindful that there are some potential legal ramifications of that.
I've got to share this. You can get car insurance.
So public meetings law also has requirements for voting. Any action of by the board must be taken during a board meeting. This is typically done by votes of the board. Votes must be public, and the vote of each member and the result of the vote must be included in the minutes. The board is not allowed to use secret ballots. Written ballots are allowed, but in order for them to not be secret ballots, the written ballot must include the name and the vote and then be announced during the meeting. These are all the requirements of the new rules. All right, so Haley discussed serial communications among what serial communications are and the new rule which kind of defines serial communications. Serial communications among a quorum of board members can be considered a meeting of the board, and this is prohibited by public meetings law because those meetings, if it's a series of communications among a quorum of the board where there's discussions happening about that are kind of leading towards a decision, even if no decision is made in the serial communications, if they are discussions leading towards a decision, that is considered a meeting, but it is not a meeting that meets all of those public meetings law requirements that we just discussed because it's not open to the public. It's not, it doesn't meet the location requirements. There's no notice, all of that. So the new Oregon rules on public meetings law specifies that a series of communications, whether directly or through intermediaries, cannot be used for the purpose of deliberating on any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the governing body. And the rules go on to list the methods of serial communications that could result in a serial meeting. So this includes in-person communications, telephone calls, videos, video conferencing, written communications, such as emails, text messages, other messaging applications, use of one or more intermediaries to convey information among members, any other means of conveying information. And the intermediary does not have to be a member of the board. As Haley walked through that definition, the intermediary could be someone who is not a member of the board if that person is being used to convey information among the members of the board. If there are specific scenarios that you're concerned about with regard to this, I suggest that you contact legal counsel and make sure that your practices are consistent with the public meetings law requirements. And with that, I think I'm ready to hand it over to Spencer. Thank
you. Awesome. There's a couple of really good questions in the chat waiting for you, Therese. So have fun with those. A couple of the questions, and if we're unable to answer your questions live here, don't hesitate to reach out to us individually by email. A lot of them do depend on the specific facts and how a committee might be set up and what their role might be, and whether or not one of the exceptions in public meeting law may or may not apply. So we will answer questions as we get to the end as well. But thank you for all those questions. And we're flying. We're going through faster than I thought. So I can spend all sorts of time. We're going to talk about executive sessions though, really quickly. And you're probably very familiar with executive sessions and what they are. And what the law says is that you are allowed to hold an executive session during a regular, special, or emergency meeting. But in order to do so, there's a couple of things that you need to make sure that you do. The first is you want to make sure that you identify what law authorizes you to use executive session. And we're going to go through a number of these today. Many of you have them in your board policies, list out the primary pieces, the primary reasons that you could go into executive session. Most of them are listed in ORS 192-660 section 2, though there's a few more in ORS 332. So, but we're going to talk through those, but that is important that before going into executive session, you need to make sure that you're stating why and why you're going into executive session and what law gives you the authority to go into executive session to discuss that. The law only allows you to go in for certain reasons. And like I said, you must identify what you're going in for. As board members, it's very important that you understand what you're going into executive session for. If you have questions as to whether or not this is an appropriate reason, then please reach out to legal counsel, reach out to the Ethics Commission, because that's on you as individuals if you attend an executive session that is not an appropriate reason to go into executive session. The actual definition for executive session might be a little bit different than what you might think, but the actual definition is any meeting or part of a meeting which is closed to certain persons for deliberations on certain matters. So if you exclude people from a meeting, then that's going to be considered an executive session potentially. So you want to just keep that in mind. Generally, it's the board in attendance, though it's very common to have additional individuals such as the superintendent or your administrator. You could have legal counsel present. You could have other staff members present. You could have students present. You could have their representatives present. So there's a lot of other individuals that may be added to an executive session. But remember, it's the board's meeting, and the board can have whoever it feels is necessary to be in attendance at that executive session.
In today's data-fueled, always
Picking up, they're having more.
As we mentioned earlier, executive sessions can be part of regular, special, or emergency meetings. So they can just be an agenda item on any one of those meetings. They can be held separate. So you can have an executive session, on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. that does not have any open portion to it. There's no open meeting part to it. And you can hold an executive for that reason. It's important to keep in mind that executive sessions are still public meetings. They're not held in public, they're not accessible to the public, but the other public meeting requirements are still going to apply. And that includes notice, minutes, location, accessibility, those types of things. You might ask, well, why is that? Well, you may have members of you may have a student or a family member, you may have a member of the media that that's going to be attending, and you need to make sure that your meeting is physically accessible to those who might be attending. A few things that are unique to executive session. First, you are generally not allowed to make any final action or make any final decision, really take any votes in an executive session. You can come to general informal consensus. You say, yeah, I think we know where we're going coming out of this executive session, but you're generally not allowed to vote. There are some exceptions around some student-related issues out of OS 332, but for the most part, you cannot vote in executive session. Like I mentioned, the news media is allowed to attend executive session generally. There's a few exceptions. Labor negotiations is one of those exceptions. Student issues, and then current litigation or litigation that's likely to be filed if the news media is a party to the litigation. So those are the reasons why news media may be excluded. News media should be instructed not to report. So as you're going into executive session, many boards have a script that they read that says you are specifically instructed not to report on what is discussed in the executive session. And then again, the board and any of the board's guests that they are choosing to invite into the executive session would be allowed to attend. One of the questions that often comes up is who is considered news media? Now, I think it's important to think about most of the public meeting laws were written in the 1970s and were largely unchanged until this last group of public meeting laws were changed. Now, if we think about who a person or what the news media looked like in the 1970s compared to what it might look like now, things might be very different. There is an Attorney General opinion from 2016 that talks about who would be considered a representative of the news media, especially looking into the blogging or internet media, different pieces, different ways that information is shared, and who would be considered there. So if you have questions about whether a particular entity within your district or within your area might be a member of the news media, or if someone is claiming to be a member of news media, this would be a great place to start. also recommend that you work with legal counsel in making a determination there as to whether or not those people might be allowed to attend your executive sessions. The next piece is around executive sessions with virtual attendees. We discussed earlier that open meetings must be available virtually, but this is not the case for executive sessions. You are allowed to have an executive session that is not made available virtually. However, and as Therese mentioned earlier, if any member of the governing body or if anybody's attending that executive session virtually, then members of the news media need to be allowed to attend virtually as well. So just keep that in mind if you're holding an executive session that is only going to be in person, but then if one of the board members needs to attend virtually because, they're sick or they can't make it or for some other reason, that same opportunity needs to be extended to members of the news media to attend virtually as well. Announcing executive session is important, and it's a little bit different depending on how the executive session is coming into be. But you need to make a public announcement of that statutory authorization. Your authority to do the executive session has to be made prior to that executive session. And if only an executive session is being held, so this is a meeting that does an executive session that doesn't have an open meeting component to it before it or after it or anything like that, then the notice that you're going to be holding an executive session needs to include that statutory authorization. So you could say the board is holding an executive session on, Tuesday, February 17th at 9 a.m. The purpose of the board will meet an executive session under ORS and then use the statutory provision and explain, very briefly the reason why you're using executive session. And I generally recommend that boards just use the language directly from statute that follows the authorization piece. And that's if you're holding an executive session that is just an executive session. If you're holding an executive session that is part of an open meeting, so it's just an agenda item of a meeting that's being held open for the public, the announcement needs to be made during the portion of the meeting open to the public. So in this situation, it may just be one of your regular board meetings. And agenda item 4 happens to be an executive session. So when you get to agenda item 4, the presiding officer is simply going to say, we're now going to meet in executive session, cite the statutory provision, and then and share the little blurb from statute, and then the board can go into executive session. These are also going to be in the in the written minute or written notice, and then included in the minutes as well. This is a sample script from the Oregon Attorney General's Public Meetings Manual. Many of you probably use this or use something similar that simply states we're going into executive session for these reasons. Media are allowed to attend, others are asked to leave. Representatives of the media are specifically directed not to report on information here. But it can be a great resource and can be helpful for you if you're trying to figure out, well, what do I need to say? Excuse me. Here's something that you can say and just have ready for you. We're going to go through several of the common reasons for executive session. Now, these aren't all of them. There's more. These are the ones that we typically see in the school district, ESD, charter school, and community college realm. If you also serve on another type of board, then you might think, oh, well, he skipped this one. Well, that's probably because it doesn't really apply to too much to school boards or in the education realm. And you'll notice some asterisks listed as well. We'll talk about some of the prerequisites or the unique characteristics around those particular executive sessions. The first is to consider the employment of a public officer. As board members, this is probably only going to show up when you're hiring a superintendent, an executive director, a president. That's typically where this would come up. The asterisk is there because there are prerequisites for this. You can't just say, hey, we're going to meet tonight in executive session to hire a new superintendent. There are things you've got to notice it. There's other pieces that you're required to do before you can go into executive session on this. The second one here is perhaps the most common or the one we hear about the most. to consider the dismissal or disciplining of, or to hear complaints brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. So if a complaint is filed against a staff member, this would be the provision that likely would get you into executive session. There are some asterisks listed here. Part of this includes that you have to notify that individual ahead of time and give them the option for an open or an executive session. So it's the person that the complaint is about that would have the decision there. The third bullet here is around to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. So again, one of the unique labor pieces, the board can meet with its labor negotiators to discuss strategy and to discuss the process, and that can be done in executive session. 2E is the next one here around real property transactions. The next one is 2F, and that's to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. In the school setting, this is probably most common to see student records that are protected by FERPA. So if the board needs for some reason to review student records, that could be done in executive session. Also, personnel records are generally going to be protected from disclosure. Also, attorney-client privileged information. So if you have something from legal counsel that is protected by attorney-client privilege, the board could go into executive session to review those records. The next one here is 2H, to consult with counsel, to consult with legal counsel concerning the legal rights or duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. And for this provision, there's like two key pieces. One is counsel has to be present. So your legal counsel needs to be present either in person or virtually. You know, they could be on the phone or available via Zoom. That would be permissible. But it also has to be with regard to current litigation or litigation that's likely to be filed. It can't just be, just some random topic that the board would like to discuss.
Keep us awake.
Excuse me. And that's to review the employment related performance of the chief executive officer or another employee. And as a board, you are generally only going to be evaluating the superintendent or the president or the executive director, the highest official within the body. So, and again, there's some asterisks here. The person being evaluated, they get the opportunity to choose whether that's going to be an open or executive session. So you need to make sure that you let them know ahead of time that at least 24 hours or one business day, whichever is longer, you need to let them know ahead of time and give them the option of open or executive session. Most of the time they're going to choose executive session, though we have seen situations where they choose to do that in open session. There's also on here is 2K, which is just another provision for executive session. It's to consider matters related to school safety. So anything related to school safety or safety threats, you're allowed to use executive session if discussing that in open session would potentially be problematic and you feel that it would be better to be in executive session. A few more, don't worry. I know there's a lot of them. The next one is 2.0, and this is a very new provision in the last couple of years, to consider matters relating to the safety of the governing body and of public body staff and volunteers. So if the board needs to discuss its own safety or the safety of staff or volunteers and the facilities and those kinds of things, you can use executive session for that. Another new one for cybersecurity infrastructure and responses to cybersecurity threats. So important to understand that if there's a cybersecurity issue that you want to discuss in executive session, you certainly can. It's important to note on a couple of, the last few around safety, cybersecurity, those kinds of things. There may be situations where you determine that it's best to have some of those conversations in open session. And that's perfectly allowable. But if there's pieces that you feel are going to be better discussed in executive session to keep some of that information confidential, then you can go ahead and you can still use executive session for those. And the final two here are really unique for K-12. So around the expulsion of a minor student and really around any matters pertaining to a minor's confidential education records or to a student's education records. So additional reasons that you can go into executive session. Those are the primary ones. Obviously, something else could apply, and these are generally listed in most of your policies. Just a few, and I tried to touch on these as we went through, but just to highlight them again. 2A, which was to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or agent. And I mentioned, well, there are some prerequisites. Well, this is just a list of some of those prerequisites that need to take place prior to going into executive session for that. There are often times where we will get a phone call and a board member says, hey, we just found out that our superintendent is resigning or leaving or retiring, leaving the district for whatever reason. Can we go into executive session tonight and discuss our plan moving forward? And the answer is probably no. Because in order to use 2A, which is the provision that you would generally use, you've got a list of prerequisites that include advertising the vacancy, adopting hiring procedures, and those types of things. So it's important to keep that in mind anytime you're looking to use provision 2A. I mentioned 2B and 2I around a complaint against a staff member or the evaluation, the employment evaluation of your CEO, your superintendent, president, executive director, those types of things. You have to give them notice ahead of time before you can use executive session for that, because they get the opportunity to choose. And so that notice to them has to be 1 business day or 24 hours ahead of time. It has to include the name of the governing body, which hopefully they're going to know anyways, the time, date, and location of the meeting, the purpose of the executive session, and then how they could request an open hearing if that's what they would prefer. So it doesn't have to have a lot of information. And typically, if there's a complaint involved, then you may be working with legal counsel, and they can assist you in figuring out what information to share in those situations. Next one, and this is just around all of these that discuss, hiring, that talk about complaints, that talk about evaluation. These conversations in executive session should not include conversations around compensation, salaries, and benefits. Those are not executive session provisions, especially specifically 2A, 2B, and 2I do not authorize you to talk about compensation, salaries, and benefits in the executive session. So if you're going in under 2A, that should really be about identifying the individual that you want to hire into that position, and the conversation about the compensation would not happen. Same thing around an evaluation of your CEO. That executive session is around evaluating that individual, not determining how much of a raise they should or should not get.
Hello, my name.
Then that is a decision. So it doesn't matter if you're calling it a resolution, an order.
Way back.
Somebody makes.
No, we were at 109, so. I was clocking it.
Nice.
It's best for this.
We might cover a couple seconds if we're left there.
With all of these executive sessions and with public meeting law questions, OGEC is authorized to provide information and to provide guidance, issue an advisory opinion, and provide written or oral staff advice for such situations, especially regarding executive sessions. And the Ethics Commission is actually really wonderful to work with, they're wonderful to work with if you reach out to them ahead of time. If it's after the fact, they may open up an investigation or something like that. But if you reach out to them ahead of the time, they're wonderful to work with. They'll provide you with information. They'll give you the information that you need to keep you out of trouble. And they will provide information on all types of public meeting law. This is relatively new to them. Just in the last several years, they've been given more and more authority over. It started with executive session, and now it's expanded to all public meeting laws. But they are great to work with, and they can provide information for you and be really helpful in that regard. OGC also has the authority to issue civil penalties of up to $1,000 for each board member for violations of public meeting laws. Now, this is typically, this isn't the way they typically work. They're not looking to issue civil penalties or anything like that. That would really likely only be in a situation where board members intentionally disregarded the law and chose to violate public meeting law. Most of the time, and I say most of the time, there haven't been a lot of complaints that have been appealed up to the Ethics Commission about school board members or about public meetings in general. But most of the time, they will issue a letter of instruction and say, hey, it looks like you probably violated public meeting law here. We encourage you to participate in training, make sure you meet your mandatory training requirement. Here's some more additional guidance if you need it. And please don't mess up again. That's typically what their response is going to be, though they do have the authority to issue a civil penalty. One piece on the civil penalty, if you're acting under the advice of legal counsel, then the letter of education is going to be the response typically, that they can't issue a civil penalty. So if you have a situation coming up, especially around an executive session, and you have concerns as to whether or not this is an appropriate reason to go into executive session, you can reach out to legal counsel. You can also reach out to OGC and ask them. But if you reach out to legal counsel and legal counsel says, yes, this is an appropriate reason to go into executive session, even if a complaint is filed later on, even if the Ethics Commission determines that, hey, legal counsel was wrong and you should not have used executive session in that situation, you would be protected from any civil penalty from the Ethics Commission. There's also the possibility for a lawsuit to be filed against the district. We don't see these very often, and especially with the Ethics Commission option that we're going to talk about in a little bit, we don't anticipate seeing a lot of those, but they certainly are possible. And it's important to note that insurance policies generally don't provide coverage for individuals who intentionally violate the law. So make sure that you are staying informed and making good decisions about what public meeting choices you're making. Probably the biggest change to public meeting law in the last few years and out of this bunch of legislation was around grievances and complaints. It used to be really that in order to file any type of a complaint, you probably had to go to the court system. And filing something through the court system is expensive and takes a lot of time. And so for that reason, we really haven't seen a lot of lawsuits around public meeting law. However, there's a change. And now complaints can be filed directly with the governing body. And then after going through the governing body has a certain amount of time in order to respond. And then the individual who filed the complaint can appeal that up to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. Now, I already messed up. I used the wrong terminology, so I'm going to correct myself. Something that is filed with the governing body, so with the district, with the ESD, the charter school, the community college, that's going to be called a grievance. Now, we don't like to see that word grievance, right? Because in the education world, when we see grievance, we think collective bargaining agreement. Well, now we've got two potential reasons why we might hear the word grievance. But if you get a grievance around public meeting law, you're going to follow some procedures that we're going to work through in just a second. After that grievance has been handled by the district or the ESD or charter school or community college, or is ignored or the timelines are not met, the person who filed that grievance can then file what's called a complaint with the Ethics Commission. So the complaint is kind of like the appeal up to the Ethics Commission, and the grievance is like the initial complaint. But that's the language that I'm going to try to use. But like I said, I already messed up once, so we'll see.
The structure motorized pergola system.
What's your reason?
Your board has violated public meeting law, they can file a complaint, or messed up, they can file a grievance. So they can file a grievance directly with you as a public body, or they can go the lawsuit route, but again, expensive, time consuming. They're probably going to start with this grievance process. As a public body, you're required to accept or receive those grievances. And the public body, you must accept grievances filed in person during your regular business hours, through first class mail, or through email. Excuse me. And you can accept grievances filed in other ways, but those are 3 ways that you're required to accept grievances that might be filed. Jump 2 slides real quick, and then 1 more. Oh, sorry, back 1. I guess there's a delay. Sorry. On your website, you're required to include information about how and who those grievances can be submitted to. And so the person and contact information, and then the hours in which those grievances will be accepted. If you don't put this on your website, then the grievance can be filed with the chief administrative officer or to the chair of the public body. And I think we'd probably all recommend that if the chief administrative officer or the chair of your public body receives one of these grievances, you consider it submitted and you process it accordingly. If you don't have a website, you can publish this notice in the same manner as your public meeting notices. But basically, you need to, if something is submitted, you need to make sure that you're receiving it, and then you're going to process it accordingly. So once the public body receives it, you have, a couple of pieces for that. Sorry about that. The grievance must be in writing. So you can require that it must be in writing. Now, an email is in writing. An electronic submission is considered to be in writing. So it doesn't have to be like on paper delivered or submitted to you. It must be written, it must be filed within 30 days of the alleged violation. So they can't go back to 2016 and say, hey, I think you violated public meeting law on this day. It's got to be timely within 30 days of the alleged violation. And then it must be filed directly with the public body. The grievance must include the name of the governing body, the date of the violation, the specific facts and circumstances, the date of the grievance, so the date that they're submitting it to you as a public body, and the name and contact information of the person filing the grievance. It doesn't have to have a ton of information. Hopefully there's enough in the specific facts and circumstances so that you as a public body understand what the claim is and what they believe that you have violated there. But that's what the grievance might look like. Once you receive that as a public body, you have 21 days to respond. And there's really only 3 different responses for you. 1, you can deny the facts. Say, no, that did not happen. You may be able to provide additional information. Perhaps you have a video recording of what happened or whatever, but you might be able to say, no, those facts did not happen. So there's no violation. That's the first option. The second option is you can say, yes, those things happened, but it was not a violation of public meeting law because of blank. And that may be, you may include some exceptions that are included in statute. It may be some different pieces that we've talked about today, but your response may say, yes, we did those things, or those things happened, but it was not a violation because the laws say this. And then the third option is to just admit. Say, yes, those things happened. Yes, we acknowledge that was a violation of public meeting law. And so as a public body, whatever your response is, you have to provide a written response to the person that filed the grievance and have to file a copy of that with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. So within 21 days, that's a very short timeline, especially where many of you meet monthly to receive one. Let's say it came in 3 days after your meeting. You may have to schedule a special meeting in order to get this processed before that 21-day deadline. The law doesn't say anything about business days or anything, so I would treat this as 21 calendar days from the receipt of the grievance. Oh, and these next few slides, I probably kind of already covered them. And due to time, we'll probably, well, I guess with this admit, this is just the third one of those options. You can rescind the decision, or you can acknowledge in a public meeting that it was a violation, that you can't really rescind it, and what you're going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So let's say that a meeting wasn't noticed and you didn't realize it, but for whatever reason, the notice wasn't published as everyone thought that it was. So the complaint could come in, you could say, hey, we now know that we violated public meeting law because the notice wasn't provided. If it's a decision that's easy to rescind, you could go ahead and do that. But if it's something that you can't really undo, then you would say, hey, we approved a contract that has been entered into at this point, and we can't walk out of the contract right now. So we acknowledge the violation. We can't really rescind it because of these reasons. And this is what we're going to do to make sure that it does not happen again. So that can be important and helpful. This is just a visual of the timeline. Again, a person filing a grievance has 30 days to file that written grievance with the board. Once received by the board has 21 days to provide a written response, both to the grievance and a copy going to the Ethics Commission. And then after that, if the person filing the grievance wants to, they can file a complaint directly with the Ethics Commission, who would then open it up and start to look at it. If someone wants to file a complaint, so they filed the grievance with the district or with the public body, and it has been completed or has gone past 21 days, then the individual can file the complaint with the Ethics Commission. They're required to provide documentation of their actions. So they're required to show how they have filed the initial grievance with the public body, and they're required to provide the public body's response as well. So if someone goes directly to the Ethics Commission, excuse me, with a complaint that you have violated public meeting law, the Ethics Commission is going to say, well, did you file a grievance with the public body? And if they say no, or they don't have evidence that they've filed a grievance, then the Ethics Commission is going to send them back to file a grievance with the public body. If the 30-day window has lapsed, then they're probably going to be out of luck as far as filing the grievance. Now, if they file the complaint with the Ethics Commission and say, hey, yes, we did file with the public body, but the public body never responded to us, or it's taken longer than 21 days, then the Ethics Commission is likely going to step in and start looking into that there. When a complaint is filed against the public body, it's going to go against all members of the public body. So a complainant generally doesn't get to pick and choose which governing members will be investigated. Each governing body member will have the opportunity to respond, though. So if someone might file
No, this is still not a commercial? Oh, it is a commercial.
identifying only a single board member. Well, each board member is going to be included in that complaint. Now, if you weren't present or if it doesn't apply to you for some reason, you're going to include that in your own individual response. But it is going to go against everybody. And if it goes to the Ethics Commission, there's going to be what's called consolidation. And during the preliminary stages, those complaints against all of the board members on your board, they're going to be consolidated through the preliminary hearing and the investigation stages, just for simplicity's purposes. It's going to be investigated, and so the OGEC can work through that in a more timely manner than investigating an individual complaint against each individual board member. But individual determinations, final decisions will be made for each board member. Dismissal, a complaint that is dismissed because the complainant failed to comply with the requirements is a procedural dismissal only, meaning that OGEC could take the complaint up on their own, or a new complaint could be filed that does meet the procedural requirements. So just because something makes its way to OGEC and they have to dismiss it, it doesn't mean that that same cause of action couldn't come up before OGEC in another way. A few more things really quickly regarding complaints. If the public body fails to respond within 21 days, or the complainant is not satisfied with the public body's response, they can file the complaint with OGEC. OGEC does have the authority to investigate those complaints, and OGEC can impose the civil penalty of up to $1,000 to members of the governing body. And that would be the personal responsibility of those individual board members, not the responsibility of the public body as a whole. While OGEC does have a role in when complaints are filed, OGEC does also have the authority to open up an investigation even if a complaint is not filed. So if they just hear of something happening, they have the authority to do that. They aren't out watching public meetings of all across the state. They're not, hopping on the Zoom and just checking to see, hey, is this district following public meeting law? But if they hear of something, or something, especially if something comes through the media, they certainly can open up an investigation on their own merit. I've mentioned a couple of times the possibility for public meeting lawsuits. Again, we don't see these very often. We don't anticipate seeing more of them. But it is important to note what a court can do. The court can order the governing body to redo the decision in a public meeting and can order payment, appropriate equitable relief, payment of attorney's fees, and those types of things. Anytime something goes to court, it does cost a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. So if you can avoid it, that can be very helpful for you. So following the complaint procedures, the grievance that might come to you, and allowing it to go up to OGEC, and doing your best to fully respond to those types of grievances can be really helpful in reducing the potential for a lawsuit long-term. And I think with that, we've gotten through all of the content that we've planned. I don't know, we are short on time. I don't know if Haley and Therese, if you've saved any questions that you wanted to answer live, or if we want to hand it right back to Janet Avila Medina to close us out.
So Janet, why don't you go through following up with questions, and then I think there was a request to go back to the slide that board members can take a picture of to evidence that you attended this. So I was going to go back to that slide, and then I think we should just wrap it up. We'll follow up. Somebody asked about the chat. A couple of people asked about capturing the chat. We're going to create an FAQ of the questions that were in the chat and kind of more thoroughly answer those questions in an FAQ, and then we will send those out to you all as well and have those available as a resource for our members, because great questions, you guys. Those were really good. Thank you. So Janet?
Yeah, thank you, Haley. So Haley's going to go back to that slide about the certificate. These slides are going to be available, and so is the recording of the webinar via the membership portal. So you can access that on our website, osba.org. It's on the top right-hand corner. You just have to log in with your credentials for your membership. If you have any issues, reach out to us. We're happy to help.
I think it's done.
Help you so you can access these materials, including the slide that Haley just put up here, the public meeting training, so that you can track that you have completed the training. As Haley mentioned, and all the presenters, thank you, Haley, Spencer, Therese, for this webinar, for this training. You can follow up with more questions to Pace Legal, OSC policy, Spencer Lewis. We're gonna have that information on the slides. And I believe we put that also on the Q&A. And then also the Oregon Government Ethics Commission as well, as was mentioned several times throughout this presentation. So thank you to all our presenters and thank you for all the questions, attendees. We hope you found this valuable. And with that, that concludes this webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Just briefly to interject, the link to the slides of this presentation are available on the agenda. So if you needed to refer to that, yes. You can.
Well, did we learn something from this?
I learned about the Oregon Transparency website. And now everybody in the state has to follow the same laws that we have to follow, so. It's serial, all of that.
Early in my school board career, we had a fellow board member that was not a nice board member. She turned 3 of us over to the Ethics Commission. I would advise you never to be in that position because it was not comfortable. They get all of you, they don't let you go.
People on her.
Yeah. It was dismissed eventually, but it was kind of a nightmare, really.
Well, hopefully we can.
So you know how we always say, be nice to neighbors, be nice to board members, so they don't do that to you.
Wow.
But a question I have, Tony, is, you know, during public comments, we have in Cottage Grove, we have public comes up and they start bad mouthing the board members. We have to sit there and listen to it. But if they can't do that to staff, why can we not shut them down?
I think it's because you're elected officials.
Right.
And therefore and so.
Yeah.
It's awful.
And therefore your constituents have that freedom of expression.
And you still can't respond.
And staff members are.
They tell you not to roll your eyes.
Well, that's what I was wondering when they talked about that. I was like, so if I roll my eyes and somebody sees that, I mean, is that a conflict? Where that's only if a group of us are rolling our eyes.
It's just politically not wise, but no.
So just, you know, reminder, I mean, we see our words that we're speaking up there. And, you know, everybody here in the room can see each other. And there's an audience out there, whether they're present right now or whether they go back and view it, you know, a month from now, 2 months from now, because it has to be placed on the website and recorded. So all our meetings from January through June are currently on the website.
And we don't have an answer to the question of how long we have to be posted. It would be nice to send a question about that.
I will.
We have to keep it indefinitely, but not.
You have to keep the transcripts.
Yeah.
But it says you have to make the recordings and post them, but it doesn't say how long they have to be available, and different from the transcripts.
Right.
I'll ask that question down here because, you know, I mean, right now we've got all half of last year's, you know, is it the years, half years or 2 years worth?
And
The last meeting.
And can you also ask them about the question about, you know, it says that you have to have a quorum to have a meeting, but it also says to make a decision, you have to have majority of the board approving that. It doesn't say majority of the people present, it says a majority of the board.
It has to be.
So if you just had a meeting of 4 people and we have a quorum, but if all 4 didn't agree on something, you could take no action.
Correct.
Okay.
I think,
Okay.
well, I will double check it for, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, I think
Well,
it is too.
I would just like to know if our agenda setting and policy committee, since we are making recommendations, are, if they're considered public meetings, then.
Well, the agenda setting seems, there was an exception for things that were like administrative. And I think that probably falls under that.
Well, then just the policy or other subcommittees that are making recommendations. I don't think we don't have a lot of ongoing subcommittees. but-
Well, and Tony specifically made that a subcommittee of the superintendent, hoping that it wouldn't have to be treated as a public meeting, but this kibosh on that, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, just want to do what's with this.
It's worth asking on specifics, as Leslie said, I was offering you something that it's administrative meeting, it's not necessarily public, but the administrative meeting leads to a recommendation that becomes public potentially. But I can still see other areas where it's going to get confusing or would get confusing. Boards have bond committees. You know, there was all public, there's different levels of them.
It could get
If
huge.
you've been through that.
Yeah, it's huge.
So I think we need a little further guidance on the policy. I'll be glad to ask when I ask the
But this was very good information to review, especially for our new board member.
And you got it all done, right?
All in here.
Well,
Okay.
especially, I know, with some time and experience, our board secretary will get right on the ball about jumping in and saying, oh, you can't do that, but it is helpful for us to know those things too, so we can interrupt ourselves if we're starting to stray from executive session.
And we're not shy on this board.
Never. Never, but I mean, I think that is good, I mean.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I think officially we'd say like point of order or something like
No,
that.
no,
Just to get the chair's attention.
Okay.
So to follow up, also, we chose all of section B, which we just recently kind of went through and readopted, as a lot of governance policy. 3 specific ones were linked into the agenda and also hard copy placed on in the seat on the table. And so those we want to draw a little more attention to, and especially since, I mean, maybe it's not a whole lot of substantive change, but it's a little change in going from an AR into a policy. And I'm speaking specifically here about BBF, board member tenants of conduct. A lot of things that are listed here, I think it's formally in an AR, now they're kind of listed number by number. And Sherry pointed out earlier, kind of behind the fellow board members, well, there is a standard here that talks about being respectful communication. I don't remember the reading.
It's a good reminder though, I mean, like, number 16, I was just like, at a meeting, I made some off the cuff comment, and then I was like, oh, I shouldn't do that, you know, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
we make
we have struggled at times as a board, but I think we've kind of grown into it now. And so I think, you know, it's been respectful, very respectful of each other. Of course, we've been all women until now. So anyway, we wanted you to review these, you know, have them.
Is there anything different on the standards of conduct besides the holding up the child abuse reporting thing? And that's new, isn't it, in the last few years?
Yeah, say that again.
Was I wondering if there's anything new or something that we should highlight on the standards of conduct, just if it's different or an area where we might stray, not to bring up old beefs, but just to like, you know, notice, be like, oh, here's something, you know, that we want to pay attention to. And so I brought up number 60 because I know that I had raised something and I was like, oh, that's not appropriate. I should just talk to Tony about that, you know? Yeah, it wasn't a big deal, but then afterwards I was kind of like, oh, yeah, no, that's not how we do it. So I have always found Tony to be very responsive whenever I do raise things.
Yes, Tony?
So just to piggyback on that, Rose, that I mean, those of you that, all of you are out in public, you've got you know, communication that you have with your constituents, with folks who are interested in public education, who have opinions that cover the wide gamut of opinions you can possibly have. When those become criticisms, please direct them to me, because if they're specifically about our operations, I need to know about them. And those are things that I could take action where warranted. And that's kind of my responsibility, and I guess not your responsibility. And therefore, if somebody really has that issue, please let refer them. And if it's really something that's potentially heavy, please let me know. Somebody on that, so that if needed, I'll follow up. Sometimes people may not be as forthcoming, but it may take me to follow up. So,
It's really difficult when they're criticizing what we work so hard for, not to come back, you know.
Right.
I hear you, I hear you, but because you can't argue with them.
and you're hearing as one board member, your
Yeah.
authority is one board member.
Yeah.
I have authority, staff, program.
Yeah. Any other comments?
No, it was helpful though.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go over everything.
it was, how knew we had to do this?
What's the return?
Yeah, oh,
4 years.
okay.
Maybe they'll snazz it up for next time, right?
Yeah, this is veteran board comes up. They've all done it twice.
No, I haven't done it before, so.
Yeah,
this
this
one's
is at least their second time. So, but you all satisfied your.
And that mandatory order should be coming up again pretty soon, right?
Yes, the way we've done that, and this is probably new for Maria as well, is that staff have to go through mandatory child abuse reporting, as do you now. And so we can link you through your email addresses to tours, I think it's called, where there's the video.
We have to do that every year, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's
I
probably,
think there's something else, isn't there some other kind of training that we have to do?
There's the child
This
abuse.
one,
Besides the child abuse, I think there's another one, I can't remember what it is.
I'm wondering if it's the cyber security thing, perhaps.
Yeah.
Oh.
If that's not required, it's not a bad one to do, because we're seeing more and more phishing emails. I mean, I can't remember how many times I've seen emails that Sherry wants me to go buy gift cards or something.
And you won't do it. They're always asking for those kids.
So I don't know if that was, we can check with the other manager. I think child abuse is.
I think there's another one, that actually the legislature. Maybe it's just this one, but I'm
I
not
know
sure.
this one is. We'll check to see if there's one.
Well, I did read over the ethics and conflicts of interest and with some interest. Now, nobody's offered me an honorarium to speak regarding my role as a board member, but if they were, I would not be allowed to accept that. So I didn't know that was forbidden, but fortunately, it's never come up. But you can get paid to speak on other topics.
Does it mean that?
Yeah, it could come. Yeah, no, it was interesting to read all the different like perceptions and calculating the value of food and beverage and all of that. So far, nobody's given me a lot of free meals, but the conferences are already included.
and we talked about this last time, what we do get calls on is, will you endorse me? And we never did come to the final conclusion on that. But that is, we've all got emails and phone calls. And,
It could be for an individual or it could be for a ballot measure.
right,
And you just always say not as a board member. right?
correct,
So now you have as a board taken
right.
resolution action on certain political, certain bills that come out, which is your right. But that's your direct reason.
Yeah, you were okay when I wrote a letter to the editor. I didn't say, I just said I was a lady ESD board member. I wrote it to happen.
So maybe that was the term identifying as a board member. I think one of the things that you can't do, if you don't want to, is you always have the freedom of expression as an individual.
Yeah.
So I do recall that was a couple of years ago. I don't remember.
I think it's
Left in the part about identifying the board
identify
members.
yourself as very tricky. I think it's very tricky if you start identifying yourself as a board member, where it starts the line between saying, and this is why you should listen to me, as opposed to, and I'm really implicitly endorsing this.
Well, I wasn't endorsing it. It was something to do with it spoken at a board meeting. And it was regarding trans kids and stuff. And there was an article and I did a little writing to the editor about it. And I identified myself as an educator, but maybe I should have stopped there. At the time I asked Tony.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that, and I don't remember exactly how it came out, but I do recall the line about it being a member of the LESD board.
You didn't sign it,
But-
nor can it, no ESD board.
Yeah, that, I didn't see that signature. The other part of it is, you just, if you identify that you're not speaking on behalf of the entire board. That's another part. I don't know how the other folks would like that.
I think, if it comes up, just check with OSBA, they did have some guidance before, they're not like you should do this, but more like you could do this, so it wasn't like their opinion, but just.
Could you say being in the public for the past 10 years or a public official?
Oh, I mean, you could identify yourself as a board member, you just have to be very clear that you were not representing the board or Lane ESD, but this was your personal.
So you could say something as a board member, you don't even need to say what board.
But I would confirm that with OSBA because you want to make sure that like it's your personal ethics, like you don't want to take my word for it, but that was my understanding. But there's opinions about whether you should or shouldn't.
The situation though is, as soon as they see board member claiming ESD,
Yeah.
it's just like, we can't take that hat off.
Yeah.
When you're board member.
Might be legal, but there's still impressions.
Good advice, but like anything we can run by OSBA,
Yeah.
I just got to build it for the dues, so. We
should
deserve
use
some
it.
answers. Yeah, don't be afraid.
Yeah, and Tana says that their board development staff are often, like for that sort of question, really helpful. But you can always check with Tony. Tony, where's this? Let him check.
And their conference in November is always big to that, and you're gonna do the summer one too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Missing the middle of the 3 days, but I'll be there on the Friday and the Sunday.
you'll catch up, yeah.
Nice location. And then the ethics and nepotism one, I reviewed that. It's a small
How
town.
many people are you getting jobs for it?
Well, so, I mean, I think it's, people can work here, but that you're related to can't work here, you just can't. You have to, we don't actually hire, fire, discharge, many people, so unless you're.
It's more likely that we would have a business person would have some kind of if there were a contract between a business person or something in the ESD, that'd be more likely.
For us, probably, I know our smaller districts, as we've attended their board meetings, and there are folks living in that community that work in the school district. You can't really avoid it in smaller, well, you can avoid it, but it's more difficult to avoid in smaller districts. So often a board member will have a spouse or a sibling, or there's somebody related that works in this. You see that quite often.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, you just can't be directly involved.
And the only thing I've ever gotten from people is, if they want a job, is I get from HR is, this person. Not endorsing them, you just know this person. So we're gonna, jump into the strategic. Yeah.
Strategic.
Yes.
So one of the work session items that we had last school year, was to take a look at the strategic plan and see where it might need modification. And our staff has looked at it. Eric's taking lead on this, and Kevin's looked at it, and we received feedback from our equity advisory committee. And I'll let Eric go from here, but there's one key thing we're going to be discussing now, and then this will come up later in the regular meeting that we could actually be asking the board and recommend some action on. So, Eric, go ahead and take the strategic plan.
Yeah, so we've had a vision and a mission that's been helping guide the work of our staff and also to help communicate out to our school districts. And within that vision and mission, we readdressed that with our superintendents last summer when we were recreating and rethinking about the local service plan. And so if you recall, we went from about 42 pages in the local service plan to condensing down to 12. And the idea was to have that information be clear and transparent, so school districts really had a better understanding of what we do, who are we, and not to get lost in too much information. And so since we're not a school district, we are a service district, something that came forward through that process of a lot of conversations was around the continuum of understanding of what our ESD actually does. And so asking the superintendents about our mission and vision, they felt like that was a strong component of our internal organization, but didn't resonate as much with them because what we kept hearing is being in service to what we serve. And as an educator, I love a good acronym. And serve was strong and actionable and really fit in multiple areas. One, there's the state charge for us to have 4 key areas to provide support, that we're fiscally responsible, we're providing quality professional development, we're really pushing to support some of the most vulnerable populations of students in the county. And so when thinking about our mission and vision, this idea of a purpose statement came forward to help strengthen that mission and vision and to more clearly articulate the work that our ESD does. Because it's really important every year when we pass that local service plan that our school districts believe in what we do, they know what we do, and understand our value. And so when thinking about the components of what the state charges us to do, what our districts are asking us to do, and also for our staff to be able to hold on to something in our story, this purpose statement came forward around serve. And so we have been using this as a living draft for the past year, and the request is to get to a place where the board would adopt it to be part of our strategic plan, a foundational component to the mission and vision. So like Tony said, we have run this through all of our superintendents, county, the AC, our staff, through you, taking that feedback and trying to really evolve this into something that we felt would support the work that our staff do on a daily basis, something that they believe in, can hold on to, and that helps drive our work. And so that's the attempt with this. And we want to bring it forward one more time to see, if there are any other questions or suggestions, or if you feel like this is now a place where you could potentially adopt in the regular session.
We can see some of it, the problem
We
is.
have a paper copy.
Well, I've got not on the agenda,
That's a good question. Does everybody have a copy of this? Or do we-
Well, I have it in the computer.
Okay, so it's linked in.
You're not
And
able to see, oh, because it's a closed captioning?
yes,
Okay.
I'm seeing if I have one here. This would be his first view of that. Oh, you got, oh, good, okay. Does anybody not, Jerry, you got it in your packet. I've got the same package. So if I can find that.
I just read it 700.
Oh,
I just printed 7 of them.
Oh, there you go.
I just think it was supposed to done.
Yes, correct. It's in. Here we go.
Okay, it's that one.
Breeze out the good. Vanessa, you have it too? Okay.
I did a screenshot, now I gotta go back.
Okay.
Let me go back.
So this, you're proposing the revision of the strategic plan to be only this.
Be added to.
Okay, so there's,
So when looking at the website, we have, and I'm sure you've seen it lots of times, the gold box that has the vision.
well, we have those cards that we used to hand out.
So this would be added to. It's just in support of what we have to more clearly define what we do on a daily basis, really supporting our school district.
Is there any reason to go back and maybe delete some of the review it? Yeah, because, I mean, if it's, I kind of tend to think that shorter, if it's complete and succinct, is better than longer.
Yeah.
And if you have captured some of the content in the other way, it might be that we could eliminate some stuff and that would just make it that much more, useful.
So what we've got with the addition of the purpose, we'll have.
And those are really.
Yeah, if you adopted the vision, mission, purpose, and then followed by the goals that you said, and right now I'm looking at our webpage, I didn't know how hard about this, but there were 5 goals that the board set. We also folded into that our equity lens, with guiding principles. And the equity lens is a working document that is part of the plan, but it's.
The equity
certainly-
lens is one we said, we're gonna go back and review.
Well, I guess that would be the potential next step,
Right.
is to, let's say that you chose or decided to add the purpose. The next step might be to spend some more time going through goal by goal, and then even going through the equity lens, maybe question by question, and seeing what we also, I know that our staff, after using this now for a few years, would have some recommendations or some things they would like.
That's what I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
the equity lens is what we did. I mean, we were sort of inventing it out of whole cloth at that time, we don't know, knowing
We haven't used it yet.
what was gonna work and what wasn't.
In our last
I
meeting
have
with
one.
the Equity Advisory Council, that was one of the suggestions that came forward, is now having used it for a few years, and our cabinet has adopted a new tool in which we based a way of processing proposals through the platform. And take another look and see, because they want it to be something that evolves and grows and it's the statute. So if that's what people are, staff doing it forward or forward, let look at it.
I was just on the website and got to the strategic plan, which is, you know, the context for this. But when I first went, I went to Lane ESD profile, and I think that page in our website needs up. It's just, it says Lane ESD, but it's only about Lane ESD profile. And it has core purpose and core values and goals and
That's on the website.
yeah, and I'm not sure if we're still using the core values, but they're fine: equity, commitment, leadership, collaboration, integrity. I think that was the last strategic plan. Then the goals are not, they don't align our goals.
So this is
Probably school stuff. It's, I mean, they're not bad goals, like we still probably want those things
Oh, I see the
to
profile.
exceed the goals of our local service plans.
See, that's the problem with having to look, we use add-ons, things we don't take these out.
Yeah.
So we get-
Yeah.
Well, just, yeah, just for.
Not that I'm at all ungrateful to you. I don't want you to think I'm good. I think this is good.
Part of the, I think the attraction for the superintendents to the purpose statement is the alignment with the local service plan. And one thing that we're really working hard on is to provide data back to our superintendents on how we're doing with this piece. And that's where I think there's a little bit of a disconnect for the mission and vision without having the service statement. Because we want to be able to come back and say, how are we being fiscally responsible, and is this looking like we're making progress? And we've already made some adjustments with that. So within the area of school improvements, at one of the prior meetings last spring, we wanna, Cassidy presented and to the superintendent, I think Crestwell was there, they talked about how many times their staff had attended a PD and whether the PD report with that data showing the impact, the potential impact of attendance, how often districts are using our resources. So we really want to be more transparent on how often, how much, and how useful we are, and just to help guide us in that direction. So I think that's where the ability to track our potential and progress is supported through the purpose statements. If you have if the board feels like there's a better place for that, like you had said, does this replace or support, or if there's an idea of how this could live differently, we're totally open for that. There's like
Well, I mean, I think essentially Rosa pointed out to us that we're still posting stuff.
Yeah.
That's several years old, and maybe it's just a matter of, oh, we really shouldn't be posting that. We may need to do something official to say, okay, take it out. You know,
Well,
but
I
that's
think we
all.
need to review it on an annual basis.
Yeah.
So yeah, my note is that what Rose is referring to, the profile page is the old 5-step. And you replace that, I think it's better to
Yeah, just update.
move that the web page just wasn't.
Yeah,
Or-
no,
or-
yeah.
or-
But that's easy to remember.
We put the strategic plan somewhere else, and then we didn't, we didn't.
But that's just easy to have happen, and it just makes the information on the website not as.
Right.
So are you recommending that we add something to the agenda for our board meeting tonight, that we would adopt this as part of our strategic plan, or do you want us to address
It
this
is on
in
our
future?
agenda.
So.
It's on our agenda already?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry. I
we
missed that.
played, we wanted to use this time here, in the work session to maybe get more questions out, get more discussion out. And then we're not going to be taking action here, but we put this in action as a regular.
It's fine, you got a word for everything. That's good. They're good words.
I like this very much.
You got justice centered in there twice, so you don't need it. Yeah, I think it expresses what we do or aim to do, and also strikes that kind of facilitative leadership role that we aim to have. You know, we're not in charge of school districts, but we can provide an environment to come together for a greater vision, you know, without necessarily being in charge or directing it, but just facilitating that. So I like that.
We're partners with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're part of it. We're just, sometimes I think outsiders don't understand, you know, from the educational system, that we're not hierarchical, you know?
Yeah.
So it's good to make that more overt.
You think about the work that Maddie does when she brings in all the school districts and the students and the staff and the superintendents, and they're working in that community. We're facilitating, but we're not saying this is what you have to do. So there's so many aspects of great work that our agency is doing that aren't necessarily seen in a real transparent way. This is that hope to really help move it.
So this is one part of the strategic plan that we're just recommending for action tonight. What I'm hearing is perhaps some other work sessions that we have, or another one, will go deeper into, I'd say, goals and definitely equity lens. And again, with some information from our staff as they've used it in terms of what we might see or suggest as changes that will help us still use it in a way that gets us to making sure that we are taking into consideration all of the important aspects of making a decision, all of the students, each and every one of each of our communities, but at the same time, making it practical. I think we've got any questions there. We've never used every one of them, but I don't know if we want to eliminate all of it. We definitely want to make it functional and useful. The people have been using it, so.
Yeah, he's kind of on the move, but.
Which is
Well, that's education. It's where we are.
It's kind of why I think each time that we work out, it's like picking and choosing a few that seem to work, walking through everyone.
And what we talked about was to have a list of future workshop agenda items. And that would be put on, on that list, sooner than later.
Yeah, it'd be nice to.
To start,
Toward the beginning.
Yeah. We still get August off, all right?
Your board meeting schedule is today, and then the second Tuesday of
Is
September.
that okay?
This is kind of August. We always met in August. August and not in July, until we read a law that said we had to meet in July.
We got the laws going.
So now we have to follow the date.
Good board, they follow their own calls.
And he'll already.
Tony, do you guys get this, I know most of the school district have their strategic plan on their website. Yeah, it's But everyone that I read, especially for Jay.
Would you get off of their back? Your husband's gonna get you.
No, that's too much happening in that district that's not addressed. So I know we got all these policies on bullying and harassment and all that. And I know with times the way there are now, I just
this little 7-year-old kid is being bullied so bad at Buena Vista. And his mother says she's complained 2 years, nothing has been done. I got videos of it. I got videos of the kid's bruising, videos of this kid on his knees with his Bible, praying for his, so he's 7 years old. And he's just being bullied at school. And nothing has been done. And I know there's policy because I helped wrote 4J racial harassment policy, although we didn't need a racial harassment policy, it all falls on the policy. I was on the equity committee for bullying policy when we wrote that. So these teachers, principals, are ignoring these policies. And I think we are at a time right now that they feel they need to ignore it, including asking the mother if she was documenting. And I asked, wait a minute, we're a sanctuary state, a city, I'm not here for sure. It's probably a sanctuary state too, but I know I was on the Human Rights Committee when we became a sanctuary city. Why would you ask that mother that? That has nothing to do with the kid's safety. So we have these policies. I know we're not in charge of these districts, but we are ESD that provide services.
Yeah.
And this should not be going on with the kid.
No, any kid.
There are other stories. My
Oh, yeah.
granddaughter was harassed, so finally, I mean, this is autistic, but this young man finally grew up, knocked her out, gave her a concussion. And then still the district is.
So for these, you're exactly right, we're not the authority over the districts, but where can we help maybe with some communication on them? And I'd love to talk to you outside, and we just had a really good meeting with the 48 superintendent. She's seen what we've got here because I was showing her, it wasn't about her, it was about showing her what the ESD does, and very excited about our strategic plan, excited to work with us from this. And so I just think it's a matter of maybe some help in community.
Please, because I seen it. I went to Buena Vista. Thank goodness it was locked down and nobody was there.
Are there, does the State Department of Education have any kind of authority in this realm? I'm thinking about deciding resources. We aren't a resource directly, as Tony says, but if the DOE is perhaps part of the solution, is also to give this mom information about exactly who she can go to, who does have authority to do something.
Each of these policies have a complaint.
Yeah,
Complaint
there's
procedure
a
and
complaint.
steps to take, and the Oregon Department of Ed does have final, it's usually.
It's a whole different environment when the parents tell you they're scared because of whatever.
Yeah.
Because.
But also where there may be some assistance for her to.
The Oregon Department of Education does fill those complaints.
They can.
Yes, they can fill.
Okay.
So
It's just
Erica,
how you want to talk to the superintendent doesn't strike me as.
But I can be fine.
I understand, and I appreciate that, but I'm just saying, trying to figure out if there's something, some kind of referral we can get her that's actually meaningful.
will that be helpful to have this on an agenda item for a future workshop, just to go over it and see where we're at on it?
For the equity.
Yeah,
We could find out whether or not there's any, I hate to say this word, but I'll jump on the legal organization that would be willing to at least talk to her and give her some advice, and I have a couple of ideas. Okay.
That's fine.
I mean, or a parent, who can get, where you can get legal advice about just recognizing that people generally don't have money.
so it's 5 o'clock, and let's go over and have a bite to eat. We'll talk during dinner so that when we start our meeting, we're not eating, So does that sound all right for everybody?
So we'll close down the
Uh-huh.
regular session.
Work
I'm
session.
sorry, work session. And just to be clear, we pause the recording, pause the public, okay, we'll be.
Call the meeting to order. I know. We welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for coming, for sure. We do have some special guests tonight. You want to introduce yourself or how I'm going to do this? Do you have an agenda as far as how you're going to speak?
Pardon me?
Yeah, who's
Whenever the public comments is.
that's where we're at.
Oh, are we
Public comment right now?
Hold on, no,
The oath?
no, are we there? We
No,
got,
we're at
no,
Welcome.
we got, Atlanta acknowledgement and oath of office.
Oh.
We're the first on this in before.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, you are there. Okay. That acknowledgement, Norm?
The Lane ESD Service District Statement of Accountability and Acknowledgement. Lane ESD acknowledges that the land we call Lane County, lands that sustain our children, our future, and our collective well-being are the traditional ancestral home of the Kalapuya, Sayusla, Malala, and other indigenous people who have lived in Lane County since time immemorial. Native children, families, and communities bear witness to a legacy of displacement and forced relocation. As an educational institution, we are accountable for addressing the current and former silencing, erasure, and genocide of Native people in Oregon and Turtle Island. We aim to join with Indigenous people, honoring their resilience, courage, and self-determination in a purposeful pursuit of justice.
Thank you, Nora. So we have three open offices to administer. If I have Vanessa, Rose, and Tom Rice, please.
Yeah.
And you're going to have it up here. Can you see that, you guys, or do you like? Yeah, we can do it all at once.
Okay, yeah, you can say your names.
I just want to approve. Do you need this, guys? I mean, you guys just strain your eyes. I can't see. Okay. Raise your hand. I, say your name.
I, Thomas Hura, do hereby swear or affirm that I will support the constitutions of the United States of America and the state of Oregon and the laws thereof and the policies of the Lane Education Service District. During my term, I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Directors for the Lane Education Service District, representing position 1 to the best of my ability throughout my term of office.
Thank you. You are now sworn in. And welcome, everybody.
What are the, I know that.
Rose, I need that.
I didn't see the sign, I just said.
I don't think there's any place for you to sign this.
Oh, no, right there.
No.
It's all right, you can take my word for it. Yeah, I'm tricky. So you didn't sign it, so therefore.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Place to sign. Okay. We welcome our new board member and our returning members. Thank you so much for your service. Agenda review.
I think the agenda is as presented.
Okay. Now we are ready for the public participation. Who would like to speak first?
I think I understand it's Ollie Pavat.
Okay.
You have to put your knee so I can.
Wanna hold it, or you want me to hold it for you?
You have to sign, right? Okay, I'll hold. I got a bike.
Say his name.
My name is Ollie. It was my birthday. It was my birthday yesterday. I turned 16. And I got a bike for my birthday. And now I went really fast.
Are you done?
Stop.
Our next speaker is Amanda Havas, Regional Inclusive Director.
I don't see a clock. I know I have 3 minutes, but maybe you help me out here. My name's Amanda. I'm the mom of Ollie. I have 3 boys and was raised in Eugene, live here. My kids are in 4J and homeschool. Ollie is here tonight, along with another friend who's deaf and hard of hearing, because we wanted to share a bit about our experience with regional inclusive services. I think it was Linda at the last board meeting. I heard somebody say, "What is RIS?" Like regional inclusive services. And with my entire life and also like job, because I'm also a deaf and hard of hearing advocate for Hands and Voices. When I heard what is regional inclusive services, I was like, how? I thought everybody knew about regional inclusive services and Lane ESD. It's so hard for me to understand like how Lane ESD works, regional inclusive services, and all the things. I just realized, oh yeah, we're a really small community. Not a lot of people know about the deaf and hard of hearing piece of it. And that's like truly just one part of regional inclusive services. So I just wanted to come and share and give a face to it with Ollie. And maybe we'll just keep frequenting these little pizza parties here because it's nice to see you all. And also in that program, they serve low incidence, low incidence, high impact disability. And see, I've been doing it for 15 years and it's still like, what is it? And so a couple things about this, I'll go to my notes. Ollie participated in the Friends and Fun Camp for the 2nd time. It was amazing. It was so good. And I really wish that you guys got to do that like every year and you took over summer school programs, did everything because the communication was amazing. Ollie had a great time and he learned a ton and he learns a lot when he has a lot of fun. It was insane, the people that came, and I met a woman who knew Ollie from last year. And I don't know, it's a really good program. So I know that there's efforts to put like raise funds and do all these things. And I would highly support that idea because our special needs community is really growing from spaces like that. So along with that, it's just a community that we don't know much about if you're not introduced to it. So when Ollie was a baby, we met Annie, who's over here. She was our first introduction to like, how do you raise a deaf kid? Because I had never met a deaf kid and suddenly I needed to communicate with someone I did not share a language with. It's really overwhelming to basically be handed a child, and it's the equivalent of like, if you want to talk to your child and teach them anything, you have to learn Japanese right now. Hurry up so that they don't lose any of their brain, any of like the opportunities to grow and expand. It's so overwhelming for families. So anyways, Regional Inclusive Services supports our early intervention. Stop me if I'm saying anything wrong because the whole funding and who owns what is so hard to know. But through the program, we've had support to learn ASL. Something that doesn't happen anymore. We used to like go to a preschool. I would go and Ollie would go and we'd have separate classrooms and I would learn how to sign a story and he would do a craft about the story. And and we'd all come together, and the parents and the teachers and the kids would do a story together. And it's amazing because life is just like the only way you learn is through stories upon stories upon stories in your world. So it really taught me how to communicate with Ollie. So as you may have noticed, he can hear with the cochlear implants, but his expression is only through sign language and like a few verbal words. And so without sign language, we would have really nothing. Like, I don't know what our life would look like without it. And we learned it because we were taught it, and we had opportunity for that. And if the funding continues to not be adequate for these families, like Ollie's 15, we have this base, you know, and we have gumption, we're just like gonna get it. But we have so many families that like, they truly like can't even comprehend that their child is deaf or hard of hearing, or that they might need support. So if we draw away any of the supports, then we need families to have access to them just like right here, so that they can just accidentally fall into the supports, so that they can continue to go on their grief journey and like learn about their child and figure out how to support them. So anyways, that is something that Riz has done and continues to do. I bet my 3 minutes are up, so I'm gonna try to.
That's fine, go ahead.
You gave a presentation.
Another thing through Riz is they really built community. So we would go to like sign language classes, and we have teachers of the deaf that are supported through this program. And through that, I've met deaf people who are teachers of the deaf. So like Heidi Korse and Roger Goff, these teachers. And because of them, I can raise my deaf son. And it's very hard to do with only hearing people. And it's very hard to break into the deaf community. So when you guys have a resource like these deaf teachers who are teachers of the deaf, they actually truly are unicorns. Like in other parts of the state where we support other parts of the state through the advocacy work, they don't have the same thing. Like you guys have like this gem of resources of humans. And then not to mention like how tiring those teachers might be starting to feel tired with the lack of resources and the amount of students they have to serve at this point. So thanks to Riz, we have a big community. And so my request to you guys, I felt kind of funny. I invited a few families or someone that's gonna come online. We've got a friend here too. I felt funny, like, should we do this here or should we go to Salem? Like, I don't want to waste anyone's energy. But the reality is that as deaf and hard of hearing parents, we are stuck in between, like, is this 4J's problem or is this Lane ESD's problem? Who's responsible for this? Is this my problem? You know, like, and so I just wanted to come here tonight and request that as a community, we could just make this our problem to figure out how to support all of these children that Riz is working to support. It's autism, deafness, deafblind, traumatic brain injury. There's so many students, and like they're our most vulnerable population. And so my request is that if at any point in all of the points that you have opportunity to advocate for us at a state level or within 4J or within Eugene or Lane Cat, like anywhere, if this could just become like a group effort to be able to support these kids, because otherwise we're going to see a lot of hardship on kids that do not deserve this hardship. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker is Jesse Haynes.
Hi, I am Jessie Haynes. I am a parent of one of the kids receiving services from Riz. My sweet little son over there. I'm gonna try not to get too emotional because it really is, like Amanda said, it's hard being a hearing parent family. You know, my grandpa had hearing aids, but he's also like 75. Old people get hearing loss. Sorry, but that's, you know, that was my involvement with hearing loss. Was my grandparents, you know, they get older, they don't take care of their hearing, they've got hearing aids. And I left the hospital with a sweet little baby. And 8 months later, we were getting a diagnosis of severe profound hearing loss. What do? Everything I thought I was doing went nowhere. He didn't get any of those verbal cues. He didn't have any of those neural pathways created. And I remember coming home from Dornbecker's with our diagnosis, sitting in the downstairs, going, how am I going to communicate with my kid? Dornbecker's told us about the deaf school in Salem, that's busing my son up an hour and a half, going to school all day, busing him home. When am I going to spend time with my kid? When am I I could ship him up there for the week. He could stay up there and then I'll get the weekends with them. But then how do I really communicate? And came Amanda. I got a phone call. She said, hey, you were put into our little system. We just saw that your son was diagnosed with profound severe hearing loss. There's this great community. And came Annie. She came into our house. She was so friendly and warm. She started teaching us sign language. She did all these fun songs that we could learn with my son. And it really set us up with a good base. And I cannot imagine the last 10 years without that. Even that first year of him being a baby and learning. I mean, I have people when my son he does have cochlear implants and he's verbal, signs a lot. We still do a lot of ASL. He's in the deaf hard of hearing program for school. Heidi Course is one of his teachers. Love her. But even that first year, if we didn't have that base with what Riz gave us, I don't know where we would be. I don't know where I would be as far as communication with my son. My mom had a friend who, her son, I mean, this was years and years ago before any of this was even available. And she sent her son up to Salem. And, he was in the deaf community, but she didn't communicate with him. And that breaks my heart if parents have no way to talk to their kid because ASL is not a big thing unless you're in the deaf community. It's not, a language that you get to take at schools. It's not Spanish or German that's widely offered through classes. There's some classes through ASL. From Lane, I took ASL 1. And while it was great, it was nothing like what I got with Annie coming into our house or Amanda advocating so much for our kids and those bases of a good communication. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, your son's deaf. But I think so much of that is because he had a really strong foundation in communication and was able to make those neural pathways and everything else that you miss out on. And even now, he's in the deaf hard of hearing program at school. There's 3 boys that are in his class that he's been with since kindergarten. They are best friends. And it gives him such a good sense of community. That was one of my biggest fears, is having a child who's deaf. He's got these things on his head, they flash, they make all these colors. Especially at the beginning of school, he didn't get his words correct. He slurred a lot of his words. Kids are mean. I got picked on, and I'm quote unquote normal. That was one of my biggest fears as a parent, was sending my kid into the public school system. And he has this great community from what Riz and Lane ESD has offered. And I want to make sure that that follows through for other parents coming into this program with kids, and it makes all the difference. That's my little experience.
Thank you.
Anything else online?
There is, but I'm not sure. I haven't been provided the information, so I know one is on one of our advisors, and the other one I'm not quite sure if they're here for public speaking. Do you want me to check?
I don't know if there's anything else online that you know of.
There was supposed to be.
Checking.
There is somebody that is, but I don't know if I want to say the name unless they're wanting to be included in public speaking.
I'm checking it. What's going on?
We're just checking to see if the person, their friend is online. And they checking to see if they wanted to speak or not.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so while you're checking, I'll respond on behalf of the board. This is something that we're not gonna be talking specifically about regional inclusive services tonight in detail. It's possible, because the board will actually have to talk about this a little later in the meeting. What we established in the work sessions that we'll have throughout the year, there is a potential that this will become a work session where we're going to deeper. And the full board will actually, on the agenda a little later, decide. It's one of the many sessions.
Right.
So I just, I say we typically don't comment on public comment. But in this case, I want to make sure that, it wouldn't just be long.
And we really appreciate your participation and coming in and educating and informing us, and thank you so very, very much. And we're glad to do what we can do and continue to do what we're doing, so thank you. Is there anybody else?
No, I think,
Okay.
because the person is not raising their hand either, so.
We'll probably take off because of chaos. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Enjoy your bicycle.
Thank you so much. Okay, so it's been my pleasure to serve as your chair for the last 2 years. And now it's time to move over and elect a new chair. This is an exciting time. So do I have a nomination for a new chair?
Yeah, Leslie. I nominate Leslie if she is deputy.
Leslie, would you like to be our chair?
I accept.
Okay, is there any further nominations? Okay, I deem the nominations closed. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, Leslie, thank you. Take over.
Okay, now. Even before I do that part, I did want to make sure everyone met our new superintendent's administrative assistant, Marina Shad, who is also a great supporter for the board, and I just wanted to welcome her, so that we have not met her yet. And also extend welcome to Thomas, even though he's got the oath of office, he ought to be told, welcome to, I'm glad to have you. The next thing we need to do is elect a vice chair. The nominations are now open for that.
I nominate Vanessa.
Vanessa, do you accept that nomination?
I accept.
Are there other nominations? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it carries unanimously. So the record should reflect by names that each one of us voted in the affirmative because of those rules that we were just.
Congratulations.
Huh?
Congratulations and thank you.
It is now time for us to do the consent agenda. And our consent agenda usually is items that are considered non-controversial. And they don't have to be discussed, though any board member can ask that anything be taken off the consent agenda. You will notice that we have a whole bunch of minutes because Maria's been hard at work catching us up on things, as well as an HR report and a supplemental HR report. Does anyone have any, I guess first I shall ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
A second. Does anyone have any concerns or questions about anything in the reports? Where's Morgan?
I'm aware of what's in there.
Huh?
I said if there are.
Oh, no, I just wanted to know if you had anything you wanted to say. Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your hand. Once again, it's unanimous, so it's still recorded.
The next item on our agenda is the financial report, and I'll turn that over to you, Olivia.
Sure. So I included a written cover to the financial report in your board packet. We're still focused primarily on fiscal year 24-25. Next month will be the first month when we incorporate July of 2025 is the first month of our new fiscal year. We're still wrapping up some things with the end of the fiscal year and some late items, but these projections are probably pretty solid, and we are on track to operate our general fund at a surplus this year, which is great considering the last couple of years we've operated as some pretty significant deficits. So kind of getting back on track, and we're projecting our unreserved, unassigned to districts fund balance to be about 7.5%. So now our goal is to just try to maintain that, and that will take a little bit of work to maintain that, considering some of the things that are happening now. But we're making good progress and heading in the right direction. So those are all good signs.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the financial report?
I move to approve the financial report.
Second. Any further discussion?
No, I just have a little question on page 4. The red and green. I mean, that's a new whole addition.
It is, yeah, we started incorporating some monitoring of our appropriations a few months ago. You'll note, and there's really nothing we can do about this at this point in time because the year's ended and we can't come back for any further board action related to last year's budget. But there are a couple of areas where we are likely to spend or have already spent more than what was appropriated, primarily in our special revenue fund. I think the lesson learned there is we have part of the budget we adopt each year includes what we call the excess appropriation fund. So
Excess what?
Excess appropriation.
Okay.
And we really use that fund to address like new grants that come in during the year. So when we build our budget in March, a lot of things will happen throughout the year, primarily with new grants that we receive. And so we just need to increase our flexibility within our special revenue fund to account for the fact that we get a lot of new grants after our budget is developed. We just need to account for the fact that we'll be spending that money in the fiscal year. So I'll probably come to you at some point during this year and ask you to increase the appropriation in that fund so that we have that flexibility to move it around when we do get new grants or when grant awards are different than what we had budgeted. Most of our grant awards, we don't really know what they're going to be when we put our budget together. So in the fall, we usually get most of those like that. Thank you. That's a question.
Go ahead.
So, I know that, there's, budget law and where the board is supposed to authorize a budget that covers all the money we actually spend. And this was just an error in just projecting, but, my understanding is, this is all money that we had, we received, we spent on appropriate items approved by the board, et cetera. And so what I was wondering is for the audit, when we get to that point, will that be something that they highlight or talk about? And will there be any other consequences or anything like that?
No, it will be noted in the audit report, just that there were those areas where the appropriations were overspent. That's really the only area of the board you'll see that.
So I have a question. Can you explain to us why getting grants is causing us it sounds like it's causing us to spend more, which sounds like, that's not how it should work. So can you explain what's going on here? Why getting grants is depleting this fund rather than?
Well, it's not depleting the fund, it's growing the fund.
Yeah.
So we're spending more than what we had anticipated to spend because we're receiving more than what we had anticipated to receive at the same time.
So the money's going into the fund?
Yes.
It's just that it's not in the budget.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's red, it makes us kind of go, oh, we're red.
Yeah, red's a bad
Didn't
color.
predict that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we're ready for a vote. All in favor of approving the financial reports, please raise your hand. Once again, it's unanimous. The next item is to consider whether to approve a proposed grant, which I think I am supposed to ask you about, not Eric.
Yes, well, Eric can help me if I mess up here, but I'll jump in. If you recall, it's been a couple months, but this was when we were at our meeting in June on the Westmoreland campus. There were two grants that I brought forth for your approval. One of them was one we're familiar with, and that's the Migrant Summer School. So you didn't need more information on that, but there was a lack of information about this particular grant. And so we tabled it until now. And you now have a link that shows the grant application that was submitted to our cabinet. And I can give you just a little more of a summary. This is really a 4J grant that they applied for, asking our migrant ed team to be partners on. They were looking to do some early literacy work and some tutoring with Latinx students and migrant students. And with our migrant department, it made sense for them to ask us, and it made sense for us to respond and to assist them, not necessarily in direct tutoring, but in the communication with parents and even recruiting students in that communication piece. So we're partners on it, and that's where, again, it's a grant we're involved with. It's something we want to.
Does it require any contribution from us? What I'm thinking about is we know that the migrant ed program's funding is seriously at risk, and so I'm just wondering how that fits together with this. Is this going to provide support for people we wouldn't have otherwise, or is it going to cost us, or what's going to happen?
It cost us in terms of dollars. We're getting some funding to help support the operations. It's that given the earlier July announcement of the freeze of Title I-C, which is migrant ed, that could have put some of the work in jeopardy. Friday's release of that money at least allows that money to continue for this year, which is what we I'm jumping. That's my next report.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's actually a little good news, so it's okay. But we wouldn't have been in jeopardy, but it was a little more stable.
So could I ask for a motion about whether to approve this grant?
I need some clarification.
Just a second, let me get the first and second, and then I'll ask you.
Okay.
Comments. So we've got Rose and Thomas seconding. Okay, go ahead.
I got the understanding that $450,000 we were going to partner with 4J, but there was some coming from us too. No?
Just our staff.
Yeah.
Well, that's time.
Yeah.
It isn't, that's a resource contribution.
And that they were gonna bring folks over from Mexico, like 10 or so to help. And I'm more interested in supporting student teachers that are already here in the College of Education that can help implement that versus bringing over and we gotta house them. It sounded like it would be homestay, housing them and paying them, and then they go back to Mexico.
We're doing that this summer as part of the migrant ed summer school. That's already
been going on.
Yeah. It's the binational program that's associated, it's not just with our migrant ed summer program, but that's prevalent in other migrant ed summer schools. I know Willamette runs something similar to that, where we're hosting the binational teachers from across, I think we're the backbone across the state, but Willamette was doing it before. And so it's not just lineage to get other migrant contractors, that it's part of it.
And it's not part of this grant, of this contract that we're talking about now.
Because the tutors from this are actually coming from, they're actually people local to them. The name's escaping me, but it's not it's a local.
I got the complete wrong impression that meeting when Anna presented. And I thought they were bringing them over, and I was like, we got student teachers in College of Ed.
No, but
then a Latino.
Yeah, the binational teacher exchange program is just an 8-week program that runs during the summer. And those teachers that visit from Mexico just participate on a temporary visa. And so they're here for the cultural exchange. And so it's just an 8-week program. And they're participating alongside of our new piece of school program right now. This is actually the last week, so they'll be leaving this weekend.
So that would have been the other grant. That one, the other one that we didn't have written at the time, but that's something we've done, as I mentioned, with the migrant summer school. That's part of the migrant summer school every summer. And it's kind of part of the approach to it.
So this whole 450,000 comes from 4J.
Well, it comes from ODE, I believe.
Yeah, it's part of the Student Success Act fund, that was created several years ago, and so.
Is it awarded jointly to us and 4J?
Well, we will not hold the grant.
So it's awarded to 4J and we're just partner.
We will provide, the intention is for the ESD to provide services as part of the grant. So 4J would then be transferring those funds to us in exchange for the services we're providing.
Okay, so we're gonna be essentially a subcontractor with 4J. Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions?
I appreciate the candor and the answers. I don't know, were they updated? Oh no, how will this proposal dismantle systems of racism and oppression that might exist? And then it probably won't. I'll say, thank you. Not every program is gonna fix everything. So I just wanted to note, sometimes a little honesty is refreshing, but it will certainly provide needed supports to students who are marginalized and oppressed by our education system. So.
We asked the questions as you requested of through our equity lens, and yes, right. Get all this answers.
Thank you.
Okay, or any more? All in favor of approving this grant, please raise your hand. Once again, it's unanimous. Okay, the next item on our agenda is some routine beginning of the year business. It's called approving routine designations. And this is approving who's going to be our lawyer, who's going to be our auditors, and where we're going to publish legal notices. And so I will turn it over to Tony to explain how he picked these people.
Well, before that, there's also just some other things in terms
Okay,
of making sure we've got the appropriate people named to transfer funds.
Oh, yeah.
There is a new name, Mallory Dahl, who is, you saw David Lanz's name there before. She's working in that similar capacity. So you're also authorizing that. You're also acknowledging or proving that you're the local contract review board, which is part of what we reviewed in BJC, which we did last month. And then getting to what Leslie asked about the legal firms, we've used the Hungerford Law Firm. Every year I've been here and many years before, they are longstanding, knowledgeable attorney firm for many districts. We hit them heavily with special education counselor. They're very well known for that. They do some trainings throughout the state on that. Miller Nash and GHR, Heeman Robertson, are both other legal counsel services that our other districts use. I would say we don't use them as much, but I want to make sure we've got counsel named here that we'd be able to go and seek advice from. I will say that what we've been doing mostly lately, and we've had more calls with PACE, their legal advice, and we're already paying for that up front. We're getting good advice if they're
more economical.
It's more economical, and we're getting really good rapid responses and good counsel, but we also want to be able to access others. And then for our auditing firm, I think still Polly Rogers is still one of the few, if not the only viable option around. It might be changing in the next year or two, but that seems to be where we are right now. And even though we've got some other publications, the Registered Guard is still long-standing. It's not as important anymore as what we do with our website.
But that's where you would do the public noted. Okay.
Still where we.
Some of those newer
It's a legal
ones are-
requirement that things be published in the record, in the newspaper of record.
It's still the one that's. Most of the.
So this involves our approving several things. And so I will ask first for someone to move to approve them, and then we can discuss whether there's anything controversial anybody wants to pull out.
I just move to approve the routine designations as a slate.
Second that?
Okay, does anybody have any concerns, questions, comments? Okay, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Are you voting no? Sorry. Okay, unanimous.
There's a tsunami.
No, I just want, for the record, I'm just making sure the record. Next, approving instructional calendars, and I'm not exactly sure what is going to go on here, and so I'm going to ask Tony to explain.
So we run a school, well, that's actually a program, not an official school, but we call it lane school. And it's like other schools, they have a start day and end date and days that students are in session, students aren't. In districts, each board has to have an instructional calendar. It's a program we run, we get kids from many districts. I think it's wise that we kind of take that action. I don't know if we should after, but I know that when the year they fell short of instructional hours, we came to you to talk about potential labor and what we could make that up. So we're bringing you the instructional calendar for one school.
In the past, haven't we had one for the,
Westmoreland, or for the Jada.
yeah.
That one is still kind of, we're still putting together some things on that one, so that might be.
So are there any others that are pending? Isn't there one, I thought there was one in
The Daffodil
Philadelphia.
School, yeah, Daffodil School. Yeah, but those, yeah, Daffodil School. Those two will likely differ, but
Okay, so
they're year-round programs, so.
okay, so we've just got one to approve of today, which is the calendar for the Westmoreland Lane School campus. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Any further discussion? Everyone approving, please raise your hand. Okay. Our next item is another routine beginning of the year item, which is the agreement between us, the board, and our superintendent about how we're going to relate to each other and what's in each person's, in each entity's domain, and how we're going to behave properly. I think the language that has been proposed is the language that has been approved for this several years. What do you call it, boilerplate?
Oh, I move to approve the board superintendent working agreements.
Is there any discussion? Worth reading. I believe it.
Tony, any requests?
No, I've looked at it, it's served, I think its purpose, or again, as Leslie pointed out, it hasn't changed, but I haven't noted anything that I would recommend changing. I guess I turn it back to the board and see if there's anything they would recommend changing it, so this will be the time. It could be amended at any time, but this is kind of a formal annual.
Any further? All those in favor, please raise your hand.
We're getting a good exercise.
We don't have, Nora was not present for this building. And then our final action item plays off of the work that we did in the work session earlier, amending the strategic plan to add a purpose statement. Would you like to talk about that, Tom?
Sure.
Or Eric?
Well, I guess I defer to Eric. Eric's done most of the work on this.
Okay.
So, just a summary of what we did.
Yeah, so from the work session, taking into consideration the work that was done in 2021 around our mission and vision statement, and working out our new local service plan and receiving feedback from our superintendents, from our MD advisory council, school board, we created a purpose statement to help support and to really name the services and the work that we do as an ESD, to help clarify and to really shine a light on the work that guides our staff and the services that are requested from our districts from the ESD. That helps in multiple ways. One, oftentimes people are not really clear on everything that an ESD does, and so that purpose statement really helps define those services, and we're also able to help reflect on the services we're giving by collecting data on that, reporting back to years. So the purpose statement is there to help build onto the strategic plan and to provide clarity and transparency in the work we do.
Just to add, we've been using this, going back, as Eric said, throughout the year. Our last local service plan was created with this statement as part of the local service plan. You'll find it in there. And the board has kind of had a presentation on this before, and another one just earlier at our work session. And so it's not new, but the new thing we're asking is to make it officially part of it.
It's been a living draft, and we've accepted feedback and really tried to mold this into what we think is the best working definition of a purpose statement for us currently, which may be subject to change when the board sees fit.
I hear a motion to approve the addition of the purpose statement to the strategic plan.
So.
Second.
We also might put on the record that we have discussed in the work session, we discussed the possibility of reviewing the remainder of the strategic plan, which hasn't been done fully in a while, and see whether or not there are parts of it that should be reconsidered, particularly in light of these changes. Any questions or comments? Or in light of staff experience with the existing strategic plan? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand.
On this, yeah, which we have got before. Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay, if you would like to register your vote that you approve the arrangement with Tony, you can go whisper and we'll need to see you.
Okay.
Consider your.
By the way, this is tsunami watch.
Yeah.
There was an earthquake off the south coast of Alaska. It's just a watch. It's been 8 points, but just a watch. And I told my landlady, I have a sleeping loft. I said, just take everybody upstairs. It's the only place.
What's happened in Alaska?
There was an earthquake there.
Well, I know, but
I don't know about that.
Did they have anything to say about it?
Well, no, I don't know. Yeah, they probably had some action there.
Now we come to discussion and we start with 2 reports from our superintendent.
So starting with the legislative report, what is linked in the agenda is the OA ESD legislative summary. What we're out of this, I think there's still some good news, and I point to the state school funds amount of 11.36 billion. There's a win there, and just a reminder that this level of state school support came with the legislature actually recalculating the formula from the last biennium. And what we think and what our experts tell us is the actual roll-up costs that this experience. Up until this biennium, we were getting just a fraction of the roll-up costs as the initial amount. This time the roll-up costs hit at 11.36 billion amount. That's the good news. The not so great news is we didn't move it above that. And not that we would necessarily move the state school fund. I think our advocacy was more in the area of providing more support for students with special needs. There was a movement to try and increase the high cost disability reimbursement. There was advocacy to perhaps move the 11% cap. And there was also advocacy in our Regional Inclusive Services Program, ECSE, Early Intervention, Early Childhood Special Education. Unfortunately, those special education programs did not receive an addition. And so what that really does is that 11.36 billion, that's the roll-up cost, isn't completely accurate when you take those special ed costs out, because those special ed costs have continued to increase. Without the reimbursement increasing, districts are getting pinched. And that's what you heard tonight with public comment, I think is an expression of the fact that we're going to need to try and serve students with kind of the similar funding that we've had in the past in the program. And there are just as many students, and the money won't go that far. By Regional Inclusive Services, and I will recommend later that we do a work session on it, but that's a contract. It's not part of the state school fund that goes to districts. It comes to contract holders, and most of the contract holders are ESDs. And so we get the money to run the contract, and any contract holder, any ESD, Portland Public runs this, they'll all tell you the same thing. The funding increases over the past decade have been woefully inadequate to keep up with the demands of the students. And whereas you heard good things about what we were able to do with students in this program in the past, we're going to struggle to keep up that level of service. So who picks that up? And I love what Amanda said about this community. Well, districts don't own the contract. The state owns the contract, the state runs the contract, we operate it. And we're getting to the point where contract holders are having conversations about whether we can continue given that there's nowhere else to go for the funding. So that's the dilemma we're in. I know Amanda, she spoke to us here, her and Ollie did testify at the legislature. We're known there for being there.
Wonderful.
So she's backing up her words. So good news, I think it's a good state school fund. Bad news is we're still not getting the support we need. Also, something that could prove complicated as we go forward in terms of negotiations with our employee associations. The pay for striking workers passed, so they receive unemployment. That was a kind of a 50-50 bill that ended up passing. And also, one of the other things on our radar was the recovery schools grant, which we applied for, we got awarded, and then we're told there's no money.
Isn't that really fun?
No, it's not, it's state, but what happened is the governor's recommended budget had about as much funding in it to take care of half of the school. And they were hoping to get enough money for 3 schools. We were one of 3 schools that had a successful grant application. It's just that they didn't fund it. But so I'll transition to the superintendent report now, because one of the things we're going to be doing is still working with the Friends of Lane County Recovery Schools, seeing if there's any way to cobble together half that school money with some money that OHA possibly has, the Oregon Health Authority, and then any other potential private fundraising. So it doesn't look hopeful. There's definitely nothing happening in the 25-26 school year, but we will likely apply again in 26-27 with, we'd have to just resubmit the application we've already done. It wouldn't be much more work. We can amend it a little bit. But the harm would be if we put it in and there's no more funding, I guess there's not much harm, because we're not really more work. And if somehow in the short session it gets funded, then we can price it. That's the recovery school. I will jump to federal funding because I think this has been something that is.
Tell me short.
Well, I can make it long. I'm going to try to shorten it. There's a lot of whipsawing going on. Early July, or right at the end of June, we learned that many title programs, the funding was frozen, including Title I-C, Migrant Education, Title III, ELL, 2 programs that we run here, and Title IV, which is 21st century school grants for school districts running before school, after school, and summer school programs. We run a consortium of, I think, about 5 districts that have Title IV funding. So that funding, after about a week, maybe a week and a half, got released. The federal government said, okay, Title IV funding will kick forward. And then just Friday, we just in the middle of the day get a text from Anna, an email came through, everything's happening at the same time. Hey, migrant ed funding is now released for the 25-26 school. So ELL also. So essentially all the other title money that was frozen was released on Friday. So
and what is Title IV?
That's 21st century schools.
So if I understand correctly, for 25-20, you said for 25-26 we're funded, but for 26-27, which I would assume would be, that funded would normally be in the congressional budget, yes? And, you know, I don't think we've passed a congressional budget under normal terms for several years. So, but they do pass them, you know, eventually. But what I'm understanding you're saying, well, what I believe I understand just from observing what is happening in the federal government is that Congress may actually budget that money and then it could still be frozen through executive.
What happened this year?
Yeah, and whether that has legal grounds, right, where that gets contested and where that gets challenged and where it gets upheld, those are the things that we're kind of continuing to keep our eye on and see. So even though the funding looks like it's there for the 25-26 year, we're meeting all the contract holders of the library. We're meeting tomorrow morning here in the state, just to kind of walk through some of the possibilities and also what we might need to do to try to make sure we're sure for this year and just anything beyond that. I don't know the answers now.
Well, not that a lot of folks are watching at home, but I just think it's important for folks to understand, because and for our staff, because, even this few week disruption put people's jobs in precarious position. And my understanding is we only had carryover funding for a few months. We would have had to issue layoffs in October or November, depending on the program.
Or tonight.
Tonight.
There's a possibility it could have happened.
Right, and so then people are looking for other jobs that they can find them, et cetera. It's just, it's extremely hard on our staff. And I'm aware of that. I know you're aware of that. We're all aware of that. I just want to make sure everybody is aware that because there's not a normal political process where there's advance notice where you know what your money is going to be and then you can spend it for the next year, which is what schools need to operate, some kind of predictability of funding. These executive orders really create chaos, and it's harmful to our kids and their learning. And there is a Congress who is capable of passing budgets. And when they do pass budgets,
You make an assumption there, Ruth.
that at least gives us some advance opportunity, right? But when it's had by executive order, it's completely disruptive to our ability to sustainably keep programs going. It's bad for kids, it's bad for parents, it's bad for. So I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a stump speech, but I just kind of want it said, like this is what happens, that we understand that's what happens. And, it doesn't seem like we have any recourse beyond lawsuits that are, kind of above my pay grade, but I certainly let us know if you need us to join something. Okay, sorry, speech over.
No, well, thanks for the comments, especially as it relates to personal. That's great. The other piece of my report, the last piece, is a kind of the latest in state finances, but it has more to do with the enrollment in Lane County. I think it was like early July, Olivia got our new estimate, or late June, right? We get our new estimate from the state. This happens every quarter, we get an estimate. And it usually adjusts a little bit depending upon the enrollment in the county. Like we're paid on the enrollment in that county. So in the June estimate, there was a significant decrease in the amount of money that Lane ESD was getting. It was about close to $1.1 million. And adjustments that happen between quarters, there's always a little bit you get, a little bit you lose, but not that much. And so it caught Olivia's attention. She called me in her office. She had already discovered that there were some enrollment shifts in a couple of our districts. And these enrollment shifts were big enough that it caused this change in the state school fund. If you take this all the way through our core and flex model and you go down to where the amount districts have in flex fund dollars in our ESD money, it's less for every single district. Usually adjustments, it's again, some districts get a little more, some districts a little less. It's not every Lane ESD and our 16 districts all are getting less. So I've communicated with each superintendent in the county. Olivia sent out a message to all the business directors. So it's just one of those unfortunate things is that we're starting 25, 26 less money than we got there.
How much less?
For the ESD, it's about $110,000. So because we of that $1.1 million cut, we get 10% of that, 90% gets passed on.
I would imagine that we're not unique in the state.
This was an actual Lane County thing, so
Right.
it was because there are fewer students in Lane. But a couple of districts making an adjustment between March and June, the state sees that and makes us based upon what the actual number of kids. So that's not a statewide issue. So unfortunately, what we lost, the rest of the state probably gets a little more. Right? So
I don't know, enrollment, I understand is down all over, isn't it?
Yeah, but if it's a significant drop.
These are all projections still for
Right.
25, 26. We just have a couple of districts that, districts report their projections in the winter, and the estimates that came out in March were based on that. We had a couple of districts that wanted to go back and revise those projections. And so this estimates in June reflected those changes. We just didn't know, like, we weren't really aware that that was going to be happening. That's such a dramatic shift.
So we've communicated that to the district leadership.
Huge.
And so we'll find a way to figure out what we trim or what we absorb as we go forward. Keep an eye on that with the financial. So, and then I guess the last thing is probably an announcements later, but because I mentioned Hannah and we talked about Migrant Ed, Thursday night, the Mercado celebration at Willamette football, Willamette High School football is where we're holding it. So the school's been at Fairfield. So you're all welcome. It's 6 o'clock Thursday.
Oh, when is the family night?
Yeah, this is family, 6 o'clock Thursday.
No, wait a minute, that's in the car, right?
You mean the
The family night for.
Yeah. Okay, that's my report.
Okay, another routine item. Each ESD member is assigned as a liaison to one or more of our constituent school districts. And this is done by the magic of Tony.
Becomes the magic of Maria.
And Maria, and there were also some committees that, such as the Superintendent Evaluation Committee and the Audit Committee, which have, so this is both the committees and the agency assignments, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this is informational, though, if anyone really had a big objection, I'm quite certain that you would be listened to.
I have one thing that should probably be added,
Okay,
and it would be the Lane ESD Policy Committee. And that's not on here, and I'm take responsibility for not adding that. That was something we added last year, and I didn't add it to this list. So just we could add that. Where it's been as chair, vice chair, and Rose has been on. So.
But I'm happy to continue to be on that, unless somebody else would like that opportunity. But it's pre-reading and digesting all the policies that we Yeah.
she does a good job. Rose does.
Thomas has the district assignment of Bethel and Burnage.
That's
That's his region. He's got a lot of people there.
Okay.
And I'm on the CTE, non-traditional careers, I already know what to find
Any
out.
questions or concerns?
Yeah.
I think item D, we actually don't know. This is a discussion item about a board advisor, but I think we took care of that last meeting.
I don't know if we did. We've got, is Dana online? Dana Brownell?
Was.
Looks like she is.
Was.
What? Okay. So we had Dana, our small district rep, and we've got Erica, Robin, Mike, our other liaison. So it's in discussion, but it's not in action. So they're here. I think we
But I don't think
welcome
we have
them
to
to-
discuss it every month.
No, we don't. I think we put.
Though we would be very
This
happy
was,
to.
I think we put it on before, and this time I think it was a reorganization meeting, because it's the start of the year. We won't be on the September one, we just want to say hi to them.
All right. Okay, welcome. And then another discussion item is what conferences we are going to attend in light of our budget, with the recommendations coming and passing around.
So we are
Budgets.
passing out the board budget. I think we've asked to see this in the past, and we have it here for you. Kathleen, we have to vote for it and see it in public.
I think if you want to pass that one.
There might not be enough.
The two listed here are, not all of them, they are the ones that I think are sort of implicitly considered to be most valuable and most likely to be preferred, but we're supposed to talk about this.
Yeah, so if you look at the board budget, if you see the account 340 and account 349, one of the things that's come up in prior years and that we're talking about here is board participation in different conferences. And the amount of money that's in your budget for 340 and 349, travel and meetings, mileage reimbursement, would cover all of you at the fall convention in Portland in November and at the OA ESD spring conference in summer. There may be a little money wiggle room, actually it also covers the new board member, Thomas's summer. Outside of that, there probably isn't a lot of wiggle room. There might be a little bit, but one of the things that I believe we wanted to do with this agenda item is just to kind of show the board, you know, what's in your budget, and if we look at particularly conferences that we can support those, it's unlikely we would be supporting a whole bunch of other conferences, honestly.
So if you want to go to another one, we drop one of the two.
I guess that would be it.
Yeah.
So will he be going to this farmer board conference next month?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thomas is already.
Thomas?
And Maria is going to do this in executive.
Does elections come out of our board? And how much did this election cost?
Well,
It's
Olivia?
$90,000.
So much it came
That's less than
$90,000.
Olivia, how much was it?
For the May election, $90,000.
That's because it was a county-wide, because they have a lot of districts. This next year, we don't
It'll be
have any,
zero.
there's
Any
no,
elections, no
we would
elections.
have it budgeted, but we're not. So let's see.
Every other year.
Every other year.
So you say it's only
I think Greg Rickoff was working on that and never got an answer. Yes, it was expensive a year. I come on and I think it's that large. It's expensive.
Every other year.
Yeah. Very
And what is that money?
Goes
These
over
are
county.
elections.
It goes to county elections.
You know, the cost of paying people who run the election.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta mail the stuff out and all the ballots, I mean, just because we're.
And the local entities that are elected.
Well, after last
people are the
election,
ones
we
who get the cost of your democracy.
Yeah.
We could go to the Board of Commission and petition it.
Really? Board draft calendars, the next discussion item.
So, what Maria is displaying on the screen is a calendar that's just in draft form. It kind of shows month by month the different activities of the board. I think on here is the OSBA policy updates when they normally come out. The fall regional from OSBA, I think, is on here, and it's kind of a tickler on here, the one that started the superintendent evaluation. So this is in draft form, but we want you to get a look at that and see something that in September we ink it, and that guy's just. Most of the things on there right now are active.
So we have the board self-evaluation. We need to talk about the superintendent search. Should be
So
September, October. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
that would be.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the activity calendar.
And I was looking for like work sessions, because you were saying you wanted to talk about that, is that gonna be a separate?
Yeah. And then we have a back to school event for ESD also this next month.
August 27th at Churchill High School in the morning, probably starting at 8, right? It's usually when it starts.
8:30.
Yeah.
8:30.
8:30?
I don't know if we have the exact time yet, but we'll get that to you. I know you're right about morning. We haven't said.
Yeah, all there, we'll have like hours before.
Okay.
Late.
Yeah, it's not on our calendar.
It's not on here. I saw it though somewhere.
Yeah,
But it's August 27th.
Maybe it's on his board brief.
It was in my board briefing, it might not be on this calendar, yeah, we just haven't set the time yet, but August 27th would be the day as well. I'll send that out again, we'll get confirmation of the time. And Rose, you did mention work session. And so, yeah, it's under this agenda topic, Chair Harris, that we're on, so.
So what do you have already?
So, well, I guess my recommendation would be to add a work session on regional inclusive services, which we heard
Did it
tonight.
include reading?
Unfortunately, we can't. I would
That
love
was a
that. I know,
joke,
yes, but
joke.
it also hits a nerve because I think that's one of the key
I
factors.
think that's what I wanted to tell her, we really know what it is, we just don't know the name.
I know. And the second thing that we brought up tonight, Rose, I think that other board members mentioned it too, was strategic planning, kind of a deeper look at that, not just the adding the purpose statement, but looking at goals and also looking at our equity lens questions. So those are the two that I would say.
If anyone has ideas for things, please feel free to send them in to Tony or me or Vanessa, and we can at least hash them out and get it on the agenda for the faculty, for the board to talk about.
I would like to, look at the goals that we put in our longer land acknowledgement and just consider whether those are still goals that we want, or if we want to update them. And I don't know if it's, maybe we just want to have a conversation around that at some point, but then maybe have a work session that helps us achieve those goals. So I'm not quite sure if I know how I'd best use that time, but maybe we could talk a little bit about that. So that, and because in the past, the idea had been, as school board members, to be more, to support our tribal history, Oregon history curriculum and implementation. And, as board members, we've done what we need to do in terms of that program, obviously, and so on. So that's an area. There's an area around just board self-education, whether we want to do that collectively or separately. And opportunities to engage more deeply with our Native American, Indigenous people, either in our programs or in our schools or in the community. I mean, there's many options. I certainly would not want to proceed without the extra guidance of our staff who have those relationships. But the idea was to become more competent and capable and connected with our Native American populations. But we couldn't do that with every single other group there. But there's one. Yeah.
The next
All needs to be done.
We have reports from administrative staff. And at least one person's on the board sent in a report. Two.
Mine was
Okay.
And we had the third, too, who just
Okay.
came also today, and so Vanessa has some cool. You guys can go back.
And so I guess it's time for our liaisons. We hear from our liaisons. Erica, would you like to tell us what we should know?
Well, our new superintendent, Dr. Miriam Nicholson is here. She's hit the ground running. I'm already incredibly impressed with her communication style. She's really working on so many things, but really relationships with our employee groups. We're currently in bargaining with OSCA. But yeah, our new board chair for this coming year is Tom DiLiberto, and the board is having our retreat the next 2 Mondays to really work on superintendent operational goals and board vision and goals. And see how Miriam, she's amazing. I'm very excited. We're looking forward to the year after.
That's good news.
Yeah,
It's really good news.
And I really, I hope Holt is not listening, but I do still want to thank Holt Gill for the amazing work he did this past year.
Yeah.
It was really amazing.
You hope he's not listening because he's resting.
I want him to be retired. Totally retired. He's gonna have some half-time job somewhere.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see, so Bethel, our community center, community center is fully open and operational. We're running several summer programs through there this year. We actually closed Clear Lake Elementary one day earlier than all the other elementary schools because we had to have people in the building the next Monday. So that's been exciting. We're doing a lot of remodeling over the summer because we're moving our life skills classrooms out to Irving. They will be done on time, we've been promised, because we need to have them ready when school starts. And then of course we have lots of things happening in a lot of our buildings, like the micro program stuff straight up Fairfield. Right?
Thank you.
And then we have a very large summer reading program happening at this year, so we're very excited about that. It's going really well. It's not quite as big as the year before, but still very big, very beneficial for our students. We're very happy about that. And our board does our retreat in the end of August, where we'll be setting all of our goals for next year, so exciting times.
And Mike, how's Creswell?
We've been busy this summer. We're still negotiating with our classifieds, trying to get the contract settled, and everything's going okay. Kind of took I think a curve when the state passed that law about unemployment if they go on strike. And nobody in the room thought about it except the union guy, but that's another story, I guess. We're starting groundwork on a new CTE building. And we got the building free. We just have to pay to put it out. And I don't know if I told you a story about that. Our superintendent did some legwork, and there's a company, I think in Idaho, that builds commercial buildings. And as a sidelight, he likes education and people that appreciate kids. And we're the third one in the state of Oregon to get a free, I think it's 10,000 square foot metal building. And we have to pay to put it in, but it'll be all engineered. And I don't know, it'll be next year probably before we get it put up. But it's really cool with the work that.
What are you gonna put in it?
Pardon?
What are you gonna put in it?
Well, our superintendent went around Lane County and tried to find the best 5 or 6 jobs that we could train the kids for in our school to keep them in our community once they get out of high school. You know, we don't want them run. I mean, they can go anywhere they want to, but we'd like them to stay home and work and raise their families. And so I think it's, of course, flight. I've been drumming that in Mike's head for a long time, but a lot of jobs in that, but I think it's nursing training, something along the line, electronics, car mechanics. There's a half a dozen things that's going in. And the whole thing's being put together with the idea of one of those careers doesn't amount to anything, then we're going to change it to something that does. So it's, I'm really excited about that. And we had Linda come down for a special tour and showed her around our new fields and what we're up to down there.
Yeah. Oh, work. CT, the layout, where it's going, the new building, the training, everything. It's amazing.
It is.
What Crestwell has going on down there. And having passed that bond and things the superintendent did to save money versus putting it out for contract and playing money on how they work together and save money. It was about 3-4 hours I spent on a Friday down there.
It really is.
It makes it, I don't know, it makes you feel good. That's what caught my eye in Oregon when I visited in '82 was the new school of the King High School in Salem. I wanted to go there so bad that I never went back home until I turned 18. Ready to go back to high school. They're doing great things. I love that those fields and CTE.
But other than that, now we have a new high school principal, new athletic director, new football coach, new football staff. And they're gonna let me do the change again this year.
Same pay or they're gonna double it?
Same pay as last year. But the thing I said before was when somebody hollers, "Hey dummy, what game are you watching?" I know they're not talking to me because I'm not refereeing it. That special needs thing, that really hurt us. I think we have 18 or 19% special needs kids in the school.
Yeah.
And when they cut it off at 11 and the stuff that they need, well, with you working with you guys and the other things that they do, I think it's costing us $400,000 or $500,000 a year. That we're having it. What Mike's done, our superintendent, is the last 4 years, he knew this was going to happen, so that people would be people that retired, people that quit and went away. We haven't just hired everybody right back or fill the positions right. We've been really picky about the jobs that he's hired to make sure that we needed them. But we didn't put anybody in there that wasn't necessary, so it saved quite a bit of money that year, that way, but it's gonna be a tough year with so many kids going, out of state, private schools and whatever.
Is your school population declining? But your special ed's not.
Well, I would guess it probably is, but it's
But not proportional.
not proportionally, I don't think.
The number of kids, the students that you would qualify for high cost disability reimbursement, you've got a higher percentage there. So your district really would have been one that would have made sense in terms of the reimbursement. That you're getting for it.
That's really hamstrung us, but I mean, we'll get through it, but it's, because they've been planning for what's gonna happen for quite a while now, but I'm so glad we got that bond and then been working with that money, because we really needed to do that work. But anyway, other than that, I got to go to the coast for vacation, and it was really fun to put on a sweatshirt because it's 60 degrees and cold.
So you had a little bit of traffic in Crestwell today, though, didn't you?
I'm sorry?
You had some traffic in Crestwell today, I hear?
Yeah, one of the truckers that we do business with said that semi and his trailer tipped over, and I think it went across the median and hit a couple of cars. So there was, I don't know, 2 or 3 fatalities. I heard. But I've never seen it backed up north and south. I was on the north side of town before it happened. I had to go home, and then I had to make a business trip over to Springfield, which took forever. And then coming over here wasn't too bad because I was just going across the freeway, but I've never seen it backed up like that.
It took me 2 hours from Cottage Grove to Crestwell, 2 hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
We had a lot of trucks on I-5, a lot of trucks.
Yeah, we really do.
Yeah.
Were people okay?
No, they've announced one fatality, but what the driver said that was right there, there was more than that. I think he was saying he thought there would be 2 or 3, but it's a mess. I mean, when they blocked it both ways, and they really blocked it, they had the traffic just shut off, the which way for a long time. I hope it doesn't take me 2 hours to get home tonight. I don't know. I don't know if it's clear.
It's okay now, when I came through.
Oh, it is?
Unless it's been another accident.
That's the most cars we've had in Crestwell in 20 years.
I just wanted, Robin, you brought something up about migrated at Fairfield. Yes, and what I got to see when I came back from vacation is the CTE program. Your beautiful new CTE building has middle school kids doing CTE in it. And last year they were doing CTE out behind Fairfield, like in the field, in the hot heat. And now they get this beautiful, so, and some Willamette staff that's also part of this. So the cooperation that we're getting is astounding. It's really great. Thank you.
So is there anything else for good of the order?
I'd just like to ask Thomas if he has any questions for his first board meeting.
I am feeling very content with everything that I'm absorbing. So if I have questions, I definitely voice them. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on board.
Yeah, of course. This was an attractive thing to run for because of the high functioning nature of this group. So
Thought I was gonna say because of the board.
Okay.
Well, he caught me.
Don't let it go to your head. I just wanted to say, I know it's in my report, but it was so awesome that Linda came over to our event. People really well received.
Oh, yeah, that was nice. It was nice. I should have said our next meeting will be September 9th here. Or September 9th.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm still doing the fundraiser book drive for NAACP.